Conquest manual in another world. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276 Black Spirit Stone. The exploration work of the Kola Super Deep Well began on May 24, 1970, a seemingly ordinary day. If there is anything special, it is that 7 days later, an earthquake of magnitude 8.0 occurred in the Ancash area of Peru, killing 66,000 people. The work of the Kola Super Deep Well was very strange from the beginning. There were as many as 34,000 scientific researchers involved in the project, but only a very small number of scientists were able to go to the site to participate in the research work. This site refers not only to the 23-centimeter working surface of the Kola Super Deep Well, but also to the entire super large equipment and machinery site. Of course, under the circumstances at that time, it makes sense to say that it was for confidentiality. In addition, all the personnel participating in the drilling work were allocated a set of apartments. The monthly salary level during the work period also reached the annual salary of a university professor. The drilling work of the Kola Super Deep Well ended in 1994, and the final depth was 12,262 meters. The official reason for stopping drilling was insufficient funds, because the temperature at the bottom of the well was too high. At that time, Kishimoto had not yet written Boruto, and the cost and scrap rate of the drill bit were alarmingly high. However, its research continued for several years, and it was not until the funds ran out in 2006 that it was really stopped. In 2008, the site was finally abandoned, and the entrance of the Kola Super Deep borehole was covered with a rusty metal cap. In the process of drilling the earth, the bears discovered a large amount of hydrogen deposits, which was a major discovery on the scientific research side. In addition, when the drilling depth reached 9,500 meters, the drill bit also drilled into a stratum containing gold and diamonds. According to the analysis of the core taken out at that time, the gold content of this stratum was as high as 80 grams per ton. You must know that a gold ore layer with a gold content of 4 grams per ton has commercial mining value. It is rare to find a ore layer with a gold content of more than 10 grams per ton in the surface of the earth. In comparison, this is almost a treasure of gold. In addition, in some channels, this deep pit has also derived the sayings of underground people and the gate of hell. The rumors at that time were so exciting. Some people said that they saw underground people with red giant penises, who would fuck underground rocks all the time. This guy was even invited to give a lecture at an Ivy League school. Can you believe it? In short, the Kola Super Deep Well is indeed the deepest vertical tunnel dug by humans so far. If the earth is compared to an apple, then the depth of human mining development is only equivalent to a mosquito kicking the apple. The Kola borehole was a relatively strong kick, and it still didn't hurt the skin. What a sad story. To be frank, humans don't know as much about the underground as they do about the universe, because at least we can still see the universe. That's why some of the underground people's claims are so popular. And the deep pit discovered by Liu Ming and others is actually deeper than the Kola Super Deep Well? Is it formed naturally or dug by humans? What is its deepest depth? In the Xinhao camp, Lin Li learned about the deep pit through the device worn by Lin Ziming. He raised his head and said to Zhang Guanghe, who had just returned from sending Ming Mao, Xiao Zhang, check the location of Director Lei Wenjin and see how far he is from us. Oh no, from Kyangu Mountain, Zhang Guanghe fiddled with the tablet used by assistants for a few times and quickly replied, Captain Lin, Director Lei is now in an area about 200 kilometers southwest of Kyangu Mountain. He seems to be sampling a certain surface layer. Lin Li thought for more than 10 seconds and said to Zhang Guanghe, Xiao Zhang, contact Director Lei. Ask him to put down his work immediately. A special plane will pick him up later. There is a new task that may require his assistance. Zhang Guanghe nodded, his expression serious. Understood, I'll do it right away. While Lin Li was conveying the instructions, Lin Ziming and others finally arrived at the cave that Liu Ming mentioned. The height of the cave entrance is about 4 or 5 meters, and the interior is a hierarch-shaped dome. The area of the cave is the same as Liu Ming's introduction, about 300 or 400 square meters. In the center of the cave, there is a low building that looks like an altar. The bottom of the building is square, and the length and width of the bottom are about 10 meters. There are 4 half-human high pillars at the 4 corners, and the pillars are carved with creatures that people don't recognize. There are more than 10 steps from the bottom to the top, and at the top is a circular platform with a diameter of about 2 meters, engraved with some runes. I don't know why. When Lin Ziming saw this suspected altar building for the first time, he thought of the teleportation array in Zhejiang City. The two seemed to be somewhat similar in some unspeakable rhythm. Then he looked around again. As Liu Ming said, there were no other obvious traces of human remains in the cave. I don't know if they were erased in advance or weathered in time. While Lin Ziming was looking at the interior of the cave, Zhang Yaking, the captain of the reconnaissance company, walked up quickly and handed him an item in a sterile bag. Colonel Lin, we found this thing at the entrance of the cave. The bag Zhang Yaking handed over contained 2 round wooden discs the size of CDs, with various runes engraved on them and a jade stone in the center. It looked like a pair of items to be used together. Lin Ziming looked at it for a few seconds, and then handed it to Patriarch Wei. Patriarch Wei, can you recognize what this is? Patriarch Wei just glanced at it twice, and a term came out of his mouth. 3rd level cloud hiding talisman. Oh? Patriarch Wei knows its use. Seeing Lin Ziming's curious face, Patriarch Wei explained, the 3rd level cloud hiding talisman is an extremely advanced concealment formation. These 2 wooden plates are called talisman bases. As long as they are placed outside the area to be hidden, they will automatically form a protective barrier. This protective barrier can withstand multiple attacks from high-level giant in realms, and at the same time has a very strong illusion array function. This illusion array will not confuse people, but can make the area it protects look ordinary, just like a normal realm, which is what Mr. Hu said about mimicry. This kind of talisman is often seen in giant in realms or powerful foundation building period casual cultivators. It belongs to the protective formation and is often used when the owner goes out. Under normal circumstances, as long as there is a set of 3rd level cloud hiding talismans to protect the cave, there is no need for additional defensive measures. Then, Patriarch Wei used his divine sense to sense the 2 talisman bases, and then shook his head. These 2 talisman bases have completely failed because their effective time limit has expired. No wonder the cave has no defense mechanism. It should be that Mo Pidong did not expect that he would fall in that secret room. Lin Ziming pondered for a while, frowned and said, it's strange. If there is such a place, why did Mo Pidong fall in the secret room of the Mo family's main house? Could he just study in the cave honestly? He is really about to die. He used a spell to blow up the altar clean, so that future generations will not discover the secret and profit from it. This is the normal psychology of a selfish person, right? Zhang Yaking thought for a while and said, could it be that when Mo Pidong discovered the ice coffin could still be moved, but when he arrived at the Mo family's secret room, he found that there was a barrier around the ice coffin, and he was forced to stay in the secret room. Lin Ziming still frowned and shook his head. I always feel that things are not that simple, but I can't say anything. Let's do this, Xiao Liu. First, you arrange for people to collect samples of stones from all corners and seal them for storage. When you return to the headquarters, send them to analyze the weathering structure to see if you can find anything. Also, back up the photos and videos of the altar and send them back to the headquarters. Focus on having them pay attention to the runes on the stone pillars to see if there are any commonalities with the ones we encountered before. Lin Ziming, the captain of the Shenchang Special Operations Brigade, the elite among the super elites, finally showed his command quality in the Great Mo realm. Then he said to Liu Ming, Xiao Liu, where's the deep pit you mentioned? Wait. What is that? Before Lin Ziming finished speaking, his eyes locked on a corner not far away. Then he dropped the original half of the words and walked straight in that direction. This corner is on the left side of the altar, only 3 or 5 meters away from the stone pillar. After arriving at this corner, Lin Ziming put on gloves and carefully picked up a small black stone from the ground. This small stone is black, but it faintly reveals a bright color similar to reflection. Lin Ziming frowned and looked at the stone, then took off his gloves and gently touched it with his hands. Then he thought of something and tentatively sent a ray of spiritual energy into the stone. After a moment, Lin Ziming's eyes widened. What? Black spiritual stone. Note, 3 more monthly votes are requested. After confirmation, this book will be the first group portrait article on Kidian. Whether it is Lingao or Lost, they have only been strongly recommended on the homepage, and have never been on the front page of the Big Wind. We are the 3rd high-quality group portrait in Kidian, the first group portrait with an average of 7,000, and the first group portrait with a Big Wind. This kind of achievement is really nothing for those great gods who have tens of thousands of subscriptions, but for niche categories, this is making history. It is too difficult for niche articles to get 10,000 subscriptions. But every step this book takes from now on will become a new record. Thank you all for your support. Chapter 277 Weird Impulse. That's right. Lin Ziming was 100% sure that the black stone in his hand was a spiritual stone. Lin Ziming had already officially entered the cultivation realm, and would soon reach the 4th level of key training. Although he had not yet developed a divine mind, he had always remained in the first echelon of the camp through his own efforts. It is worth mentioning that the 4 words one's own efforts were not just polite words. Although Lin Ziming was the general manager of the camp's troops, he did not enjoy any preferential treatment in terms of cultivation resources. The resources were distributed according to the ordinary 3 spiritual root warriors. There were dozens of 3 spiritual root warriors in the camp at present. Lin Ziming had to take care of a lot of internal affairs on weekdays while maintaining his ranking in the 5th or 6th place. The sweat he put in was imaginable. At present, the first in the cultivation realm of the camp was naturally Xiao Yi and Yuan Lao, followed by the 3-level key training warriors represented by Lin Ziming. At this level, the practitioners already had a certain induction ability. Therefore, when Lin Ziming picked up this small black stone earlier, he felt something was wrong. After all, completely black stones are different from non-Africans. There are a lot of non-Africans in reality. For example, many of my classmates are this kind of people. But completely black stones are still not very common in ordinary mountains and forests. It is the kind of situation that you feel that there are a lot of them, but it is difficult to find them if you look carefully. Not to mention that this stone is not only completely black, but also exudes an inexplicable reflection on the surface. It is a bit similar to the local obsidian. It is better to say that it is a black crystal than an ordinary stone. In addition, when touching the stone, Lin Ziming felt that it was faintly emitting some strange rhythms, stirring his inner sea. Lin Ziming has only encountered this feeling on one object spiritual stone. Therefore, he tried to input some spiritual energy into it, but he didn't expect that the other party really gave feedback. Black spiritual stone. After confirming this, Lin Ziming immediately turned around and found the old master Wei. He handed over the black spirit stone and said, "Old patriarch, take a look at this. By the way, don't try to extract spiritual energy from it." Old patriarch Wei took the spirit stone, looked at it, and injected some spiritual energy into it like Lin Ziming did before. Immediately, he raised his eyebrows and said in surprise, "This is a spirit stone." Seeing that Patriarch Wei also confirmed the origin of the black stone, Lin Ziming hurriedly asked, "Patriarch Wei, have you seen this kind of black spirit stone before?" Patriarch Wei shook his head decisively without hesitation. "Never seen it. Colonel Lin, you should know that the spirit stones in the Great Mo realm are divided into 4 grades, upper, middle, lower and top grade. Most of the time, what we see, or can see, are lower grade spirit stones. However, although the other 3 types of spirit stones are extremely rare, they are all green in appearance. It is just rumored that the higher the grade of the spirit stone, the deeper the green it will appear. When it comes to the top grade spirit stone, its appearance is a deep dark green. But no matter how dark the color is, it can never be black in appearance." Lin Ziming nodded gently and looked at the black spirit stone again. He could clearly feel that there was still a small amount of spiritual energy in the spiritual stone, which could be extracted with a little guidance. But considering its somewhat scary appearance, Lin Ziming would never dare to do such a thing here. After all, everyone has heard some stories about SPC these days, and who knows if it will be a source of infection or something. Then he carefully put the spiritual stone into a composite self-sealing bag and said to Zhang Yaking, "Captain Zhang, please take people to search carefully to see if there are any more black spiritual stones in the cave." Then he looked at Liu Ming again and continued what he had not finished saying before. "Xiao Liu, where's the deep pit you mentioned? Take me to have a look." Liu Ming nodded, pointed to the back of the altar, and said, "Colonel Lin, the deep pit is behind the altar. Please follow me." Then the group took a few steps under the guidance of Liu Ming and soon came to a huge deep pit behind the altar. The pit mouth was an oval shape that looked a bit like an egg, with a maximum width of about 2 to 3 meters. It was pitch black inside, and the bottom was unseen. At this time, some barriers had been set up around the pit to prevent people from accidentally falling into the pit. In addition, a military laser rangefinder was placed on the left side of the pit, and the screen was currently black and white. After everyone came to the edge of the deep pit, Liu Ming introduced, Colonel Lin, the widest diameter of this pit is 2.8 meters, and the shortest is 1.9 meters. We originally planned to throw a stone down after the laser rangefinder failed, but considering the unknown risks, we finally gave up. Lin Ziming stared at the deep pit and thought for a few seconds, and suddenly thought of a possibility. Xiao Liu, could it be that there is actually a space similar to a light gate under this pit, so the detector can't reach the bottom? Liu Ming shook his head when he heard this, denying Lin Ziming's guess. Colonel Lin, although our laser can't reach the bottom at maximum power, the light is still visible and has not been swallowed up and isolated. In addition, we also deflected its angle a little, trying to make it shine on the rock wall. The results confirmed that the distance to the rock wall can be correctly measured and calculated. And if there is an alien space channel like a light gate under the deep pit, then the laser will definitely not be able to measure any information. Lin Ziming was silent for a few seconds after hearing this, waved to the soldiers around him, and said, Okay, Xiao Liu, let's take a break and debug the equipment. Director Lei Wenjin is on his way. They are exploration experts. Let's see if they have any discoveries later. Then Lin Ziming walked carefully to the edge of the deep pit and looked into it. Although he wanted to try to shout hello into it. But considering that this is the Great Mo realm, he finally gave up this idea. After all, who knows if there is any life underground? A stone awakening the boss is a classic plot that can't be more classic. There are certainly no underground people in the local area. But this is the Great Mo realm, and any alien life form has the possibility and conditions to exist. According to the extreme simulation of the command center, the ecological conditions of the Great Mo realm combined with the spiritual energy may even give birth to giants of hundreds of meters. Of course, this kind of creature is currently just a guess. Moreover, even if such a creature exists, their bones can hardly withstand the huge pressure, so there must be some limitations in their movements. While Lin Ziming was thinking, Zhang Yaking walked towards him again. Captain Lin, we found 2 more black spiritual stones. Lin Ziming's face straightened when he heard this, and he took 2 black stones of the same size. Captain Zhang, thank you for your hard work. Before Lin Li and other main leaders arrived at the scene, Zhang Yaking and his team had only conducted a relatively simple search of the cave. That is, to see if there were any obvious traces of human remains or large objects. The area of the cave is as large as 300 or 400 square meters, and there are many irregular rocks distributed in it. In addition, Zhang Yaking can only command 5 or 6 people, so it is normal to miss something without full exploration. Now that Lin Ziming has arrived at the scene, the search team has a backbone. With all kinds of equipment and manpower fully turned on, it is not surprising to have new discoveries. And at the moment when Lin Ziming took the 2 spiritual stones, for some reason, he suddenly had an impulse to refine the spiritual stones and then jump into the deep pit. Although this impulse came and went quickly, it still made him shudder violently. Then Lin Ziming looked at the 2 spirit stones with a sharp gaze. I'm not bragging, to be able to be the main person in charge of the current army, Lin Ziming's awareness and intelligence are definitely beyond doubt. At least it's impossible for him to have such inexplicable thoughts in his mind just by looking at the 2 spirit stones. Thinking of this, he quickly looked at the old patriarch Wei. Old patriarch, do you have anything that can isolate the divine thoughts? Can you seal up these 2 or 3 spirit stones together? Although the old patriarch Wei was a little surprised by Lin Ziming's reaction, he still said, this is not difficult. I have an artifact called the Ice Spirit Box that can do this. This item is a common item for the foundation building cultivators of the Great Mo realm when they go out, in case they encounter some precious spiritual materials that cannot be collected or kept secret and cause accidents. Colonel Lin, wait a moment, I'll look for it, and I found it. The old patriarch Wei took out a small box that looked very ordinary from the storage bag, then put the 3 spirit stones in it and handed it to Zhang Yaking. Seeing this, Lin Ziming breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, the sound of a helicopter came from outside the cave. Beep beep beep, Lei Wenjin is here. Chapter 278 Patriarch Wei's Doubts. As introduced before, the pattern of Kyangu Mountain is a typical one with high peaks in the east and low peaks in the west, and the top view is circular. In other words, it looks like a cylinder that is high in the east and low in the west, and is somewhat hollow inside. The cave discovered by Liu Ming, Zhang Yaking and others is located at the foot of the 3rd highest peak in the east, so there is a flat land in front of the cave entrance that can be used to park a helicopter. Lei Wenjin's helicopter landed here, without having to walk an extra section of mountain road like Lin Ziming did before. When Lei Wenjin walked out of the helicopter door, Lin Ziming hurriedly stepped forward and stretched out his hand and said, Director Lei, I didn't expect that we would meet again so soon. The reason why it is again is because Lin Ziming had just cooperated with Lei Wenjin in Yangbai City more than a month ago. At that time, Lei Wenjin also came to Yangbai City by helicopter to explore the iron ore owned by the Mo family. The cooperation between the two parties was very tacit, and the exploration results were extremely satisfactory. The rabbits obtained a high-quality medium-sized iron ore. However, compared to the last time in Yangbai City, Lei Wenjin's face was full of fatigue. He had been leading the team to carry out exploration tasks for more than a month, and found many potential mineral sources of different sizes for the rabbits. In order to save time during this period, they ate emergency food, lived in car sleeping bags, and took a shower only once every 3 or 4 days. It was really a life of hard work. In fact, the headquarters did not have too strict requirements for the geological exploration team. After all, exploration often depends on luck, and you can't decide where there are rich mines. But the headquarters did not have any substantial requirements, but Lei Wenjin's team had another idea. They knew that the local resources were short in the Great Mo realm. If they wanted to gain a foothold in the Great Mo realm, self-sufficiency was a must. Therefore, the entire team of 16 people, both men and women, old and young, had been desperately carrying out exploration tasks during this period. Today, Lei Wenjin was leading the team to explore an area suspected of copper mines, and he received a message from Lin Li that there was a deep pit in Kyangu Mountain that needed his assistance. Lei Wenjin did not explain his physical condition. He hurriedly handed over some key matters to other members and took a helicopter to Kyangu Mountain. On the temporary helipad, Lei Wenjin suppressed the urge to yawn and shook hands with Lin Ziming. Colonel Lin, please take care of me this time. After letting go, Lin Li looked at Lei Wenjin's bloodshot eyes and frowned. Director Lei, what's wrong with your eyes? Lei Wenjin waved his hand quickly. Well, I didn't sleep well in the past few days. It's okay. Colonel Lin, I brought the equipment this time. Where is the deep pit? Lin Ziming did not answer his question, but pulled up his wrist. Lei Wenjin thought at first that Lin Ziming was going to check if his palm was injured, or if he had learned some magic to read the palm, so he let him fiddle with it. However, after a while, Lei Wenjin gradually felt that something was wrong. A very warm and long breath came faintly from his wrist, and this breath slowly flowed into his body along his arm. First, it went to his waist and abdomen, then to his heart, and finally directly to his brain. How should I put it? It was a bit like fumigating local red earth agarwood, but the actual feeling was several times stronger than red earth agarwood. As this breath permeated, Lei Wenjin found that his original physical fatigue gradually disappeared. Then he suddenly realized something and quickly pressed Lin Ziming's hand. Colonel Lin, what are you doing? Let go quickly, hurry up. That's the spiritual power you worked so hard to refine. Immediately, Lei Wenjin was like a friend at the front desk of a hotel who wanted to rush to pay the bill. He held Lin Ziming's wrist and shook it there, trying desperately to tear the other's hand away. However, at this time, Lin Ziming was already a practitioner of the 3rd level of key training, and his physical fitness was much stronger than before. How could Lei Wenjin twist him? So, he could only shout and stop while watching Lin Ziming transfer the spiritual power into his body. After a few minutes, Lin Ziming slowly let go of his hand. He wiped the sweat on his forehead and neck and said to Lei Wenjin, Director Lei, do you feel better now? The spiritual power can only temporarily relieve your fatigue. You should take a good rest for a few days after this mission. Although Lin Ziming did not master the technique of taking pulses, as a practitioner, it was still very simple to sense the state of the other person's body through spiritual power. Especially for an official practitioner like him who has sufficient resources, his foundation is extremely solid, and his perception and use of spiritual energy is not even weaker than that of ordinary 4th or 5th level key training. The only difference is that he has not given birth to divine thoughts. Therefore, the moment he just held Lei Wenjin's wrist, Lin Ziming found that the other party's body was on the verge of fatigue. Although it was not so exaggerated that he would die immediately, no one could say if he could hold on any longer. It was considered to have reached a red line, and if it went any further, it would be the end of his life. However, Lin Ziming knew Lei Wenjin's character. Unless he knocked him out, this kind of practical man would never agree to rest at this critical juncture. He will definitely try his best to complete this task. Because it's not just Lei Wenjin, Lin Ziming, or most of the members of the Xinhao camp are also this kind of people. If you want to say it's some kind of political awareness, it's not necessarily true. If you ask Lei Wenjin to talk about national justice and national sentiment, he may not be able to say a word. In fact, the official has never treated everyone who came to the Dama world unfairly, and all kinds of supplies are actually rationed very adequately. But from the core layer, such as Qin's Hendong, to the frontline personnel such as Lin Li and Lei Wenjin, everyone is very spontaneous to save as much as possible and seize the time as much as possible. When asked the reason, they all said, "I'm used to being frugal." In fact, expecting someone to save a pill or stay up all night to have a substantial help to the progress of the camp is a false proposition that is basically impossible to establish and a very unrealistic fantasy. Do Lei Wenjin and others really not understand this? The answer is obviously no. But they still did it. And this is the reason why the Chinese nation has been passed down to this day. We have countless Lei Wenjin, countless Qin's Hendong, countless tiny forces gathered together, and then shook the world. This is a spirit that is deeply rooted in the soul of every Chinese, an inextinguishable flame. So Lin Ziming did not persuade Lei Wenjin to rest. Instead, he silently passed his fire to Lei Wenjin, and he became one of those countless people. Aura is in Greek letter alpha substance, and the spiritual power refined by the practitioner is more special. Especially when it comes to problems related to spirit, spiritual power can easily make up for the loss in this aspect. The lower the realm, the better the compensation effect. Therefore, with Lin Ziming's crossing, Lei Wenjin's condition suddenly improved by more than half. And what Lin Ziming paid was a mostly empty inland sea. Although it did not damage his foundation, his progress in cultivation during this period would be seriously delayed. The old master Wei on the side saw this scene, and suddenly he had an extremely strange feeling in his heart. He suddenly found that these family members of his suddenly couldn't see through. Why would someone waste most of his refined spiritual power for a mortal who called him comrade? Why did Lin Ziming still smile after doing this? But on the other hand, Patriarch Wei was also a little envious. Because this kind of situation is too rare in the Great Mo realm. Apart from relatives, only a few individual confidants may do this. Patriarch Wei dares to guarantee that there are no more than 3 practitioners in the world who are willing to do this for him, and all of them are his lifelong friends. However, the relationship between Lin Ziming and Lei Wenjin is obviously not that level. They don't even use the title of Lao X commonly used by Chinese people. The two sides only use honorific titles to address each other. And in this case, Lin Ziming actually paid such a price for Lei Wenjin? Patriarch Wei suddenly found that his brain, which was more than 14% developed, was not enough. Lin Ziming, who was standing by, didn't understand the doubts of the old master Wei. At this moment, he was smiling and explaining to Lei Wenjin, "Old Lei, don't worry, I'm fine. I'll be back after a few rounds of meditation." Lin Ziming's smile was very hearty, so Lei Wenjin, who hadn't even started to awaken his spirit, was really fooled by him, thinking that Lin Ziming had just paid a simple price. "Okay, old Lin, I'll treat you to a drink when we get back to the camp." Then his expression became serious, and he pointed to the equipment that had been moved down beside him and said, "Old Lin, let's get back to the topic. Should we go into the cave?" Hearing this, Lin Ziming patted Lei Wenjin's shoulder heavily. "Okay, since your professional foreign aid is here, let's go and see what the pit is. Please give me some monthly tickets. We have been fluctuating between 148 and 150 these days, and have occupied these 3 rankings with the other 3 books for almost a week. We have been exploding each other every few hours. Come on, give me some tickets to move forward. There will be 3 updates tomorrow." Chapter 279 Unfathomable. Lei Wenjin got off the plane near the cave, so after he recovered his spirit, it didn't take long for everyone to get into the cave. After arriving at the cave, Lei Wenjin first asked his assistant to debug the equipment at the edge of the deep pit to prepare for the survey later. The debugging process is not simple. Whether it is fixing the instrument or calculating the angle of illumination, it is not an easy task. He took advantage of this gap to come to the inside of the cave entrance and carefully studied the rocks near the entrance. He first touched the surface of the sand and gravel with his hand. This rock wall, which ordinary people can only say no cracks after looking at it for a long time, is a sample that can provide a lot of information in Lei Wenjin's eyes. This is the difference between insiders and outsiders, just like some old drivers can download a short movie with less than 10 letters plus numbers. Then Lei Wenjin picked up a small tungsten steel sands drill and started to drill it in non-load-bearing part of the rock wall. Click, click, click. The drilling process lasted for more than 2 minutes, and the drill bit penetrated about 20 centimeters. Then Lei Wenjin put down the equipment and replaced it with a set of precision probes. Another 5 minutes passed. Lei Wenjin stood up and said to Lin Ziming, "Colonel Lin, the SPF is about 50, the rock wall structure is very clear, and there is no obvious sign of fracture in the core." "This is a standard medium weathering," Lin Ziming quickly asked. "Medium weathering? Is there a specific year reference?" Lei Wenjin thought for a while, pointed to a lady outside the cave entrance that was being blown by the breeze and said, "Although the arc-shaped top of this cave is a typical wind outlet structure, the location of the cave entrance is biased towards the side of the positive wind direction, and the degree of wind exposure is not particularly strong. So based on these judgments, the time when the cave began to show signs of weathering was about 60 years ago, more than 60 years." Hearing this number, Lin Ziming and the Old Master Wei looked at each other and said thoughtfully, "Old Master Wei, it seems that your guess should be correct, according to the records of the Mo family tree. Mo Xiaonan was born more than 270 years ago. He was possessed by Mo Pidong when he was 17 years old. He disappeared when he was nearly 90 years old. Therefore, the year of his disappearance was about 180 years ago. This year is about 30 years different from the C14 results made by Wang Jun and others. Therefore, it is highly likely that Mo Xiaonan stayed in the secret room for about 30 years and died. Although there are still many unsolved questions about the cause of death of the third ancestor of the Mo family who was possessed. For example, a practitioner of the 5th level of the Jiandin realm can theoretically live for more than 200 years, and should not naturally die so early. But these are all things that happen within a specific node and have nothing to do with the timeline. According to the previous speculation of the Old Master Wei, the 3rd level cloud hidden talisman lost its effect when no one input spiritual energy or provided spiritual stones for a long time, which led to the exposure of the cave. Lei Wenjin's test results basically provided data support for this speculation. Lei Wenjin then took samples at many locations in the cave and finally determined that the cave was exposed more than 60 years ago. Although human identification may not be as accurate as mechanical analysis, there is a certain deviation in theory. But no matter how big this error is, it can't be as exaggerated as 100 years. After all, surface weathering may behave differently due to various reasons, but cores are not so easy to have problems. After confirming this information, Lei Wenjin followed Lin Ziming and others to the edge of the deep pit. At this moment, a device that is somewhat similar to the dental integrated machine that you lie on when you see a dentist has been placed above the hole. Lei Wenjin's assistant Feng Yuho is typing on the keyboard quickly with both hands to calculate the data. To be honest, this speed of hand is used to write novels at least 30,000 words a day. After arriving at the edge of the pit, seeing that the relevant equipment is still being debugged, Lei Wenjin squatted down and observed the deep pit with his naked eyes. Lin Ziming looked at Lei Wenjin and said half-jokingly and half-warningly, "Old Lei, be careful. If you fall into this pit, you will die." Lei Wenjin nodded and suddenly exclaimed. Then he crawled to the ground and reached down with his right hand. Crack! A stone about 40 to 50 centimeters deep in the pit was gently broken off by him. Then Lei Wenjin pulled his hand out, looked at the stone, frowned, and said, "Something's wrong. This stone is different from the rocks at the entrance and inside the cave." "It's completely different." Lin Ziming looked at him and asked, "What do you mean?" Lei Wenjin first pointed to the entrance and the top of the cave. The places he pointed to were all standard brown rocks. He said, "The rocks inside the cave and at the entrance are common phyllite and basalt, with a slight appearance of gneiss. This is a very common rock in the local area and the Great Mo realm. It is a common variety evolved due to oxygen content and planetary gravity." Then he showed the stone in his hand to Lin Ziming, pointed to the convex point on it and said, "But this stone is different. It looks a bit like an ultra-basic intrusive rock. Colonel Lin, do you see the granular structure and block structure on it? This shows that its metal content is very high, either iron or magnesium. And I saw this area when I came here. It is a standard oblique scattered terrain. It is impossible for metal veins to exist." Lin Ziming looked at him, thinking, then Director Lei, "Do you mean it was placed here by someone? Or even man-made?" Lei Wenjin was silent for a while and shook his head. "It's hard to say. I can only say that it is possible. After all, it's just a sample. The Great Mo realm is mysterious and unpredictable, and there may be some geological structures beyond our concept. Then he looked at his assistant Feng Yuhua and asked, Yuhua, is the rangefinder ready? Feng Yuhua nodded quickly and replied, Lei Institute, the data and inclination have been debugged. This time, Lei Wenjin and his team brought an ultra-long-range laser rangefinder, which is more than 4 times more effective than Lin Ziming's. This rangefinder can be said to be the device that measures the farthest distance. Except for astronomical equipment, the principle of astronomical equipment is completely different and cannot be compared. The positioning of this detector is actually ultra-long-range detection under extreme conditions. After all, the Great Mo realm is different from the mainland. After the day is over, it is 168 hours of night. Without some powerful equipment, it is impossible to work normally in the field. Even when the headquarters was preparing this machine, one of the possible uses they considered was to deeply detect unknown pits. After all, field detection is difficult, but in theory, there are only a few projects, which can be listed by exhaustive enumeration. According to the original design, under normal circumstances, this device can detect a range of 100 kilometers. That is, it is about a little shorter than Chongming Island to Songjiang. Then Lin Ziming confirmed that the generator he brought was enough to support the maximum power of the detector, and said to Lei Wenjin, Director Lei, let's start. Lei Wenjin had already stood at the main console at this time. He nodded and said to Feng Yuhua, Yuhua, turn on the machine. Feng Yuhua's hands once again made a residual image on the keyboard, and at the same time, he said at least, measure the inclination of 7.29 degrees, the output power starts at 500 milliwatts, and the red text is pulled to the far left. Start. The next second, the laser rangefinder received the command and instantly emitted a subtle red light. Whoosh! Everyone knows the speed of light, which is 299,792.458 kilometers per second. The irradiation distance of this device at the maximum power is 100 kilometers, which means that it takes less than a blink of an eye from the time the laser is emitted to the time it reaches its limit. However, what made everyone feel cold behind their backs was that after a few seconds, the screen was still blank. That is to say, the depth of this cave entrance exceeds 80 kilometers, or 80,000 meters. Lei Wenjin stared at the screen tightly, and after a while, he suddenly said, Yuhua, prepare the rope. I want to go down the pit. I don't know what happened. I feel very uncomfortable and vomit crazily. I guess I ate something bad. Another book recommended is I Entered the Dark Paradise, a thriller and suspense article. There was a sound of all prying in the uninhabited room next door, and the dark traces of the human figure in the corner of the wall were deepening. Footsteps kept coming and going outside the door, but when the door was opened, there was no one. A cold hand was placed on Chu Zio's shoulder, and a cold voice came, Welcome to the Dark Paradise. Chapter 280, Down into the Pit. I want to go down the pit. After hearing Lei Wenjin's somewhat abrupt statement, everyone at the scene didn't react for a moment. Finally, Lin Ziming came back to his senses first. He looked at Lei Wenjin and said in a serious tone, Go down the pit now? No, it's too dangerous. Let's not talk about alien creatures. We don't even know if there are any dangerous gases below. It's too risky to go down rashly. Lei Wenjin heard this and waved his hand at Lin Ziming to signal him not to rush. He explained, Colonel Lin, I don't mean to go down to the deepest point to explore the bottom now. We don't have the conditions to reach a depth of at least 80,000 meters now. I mean to go down to an area of about 100 to 200 meters to analyze the address structure and collect a few samples. This operation is not very risky. At least we should clarify the area closest to the ground in this deep pit, right? Colonel Lin, we are all adults, and we can even say that we are elites among adults. We have all the necessary judgment. This deep pit and the altar are obviously problematic, and the black spirit stone you found, this deep pit must involve some extraordinary secrets. It is difficult to do a real-life analysis by just sending a drone down the pit, so professionals must go down and take a look in person. Lin Ziming still chose to insist on not letting Lei Wenjin take risks, and continued, That's right, then we should wait for the headquarters to send someone to the scene, don't you think so? Lei Wenjin glanced at him and suddenly smiled. Who do you think you should send? Believe it or not, I'll still go down in the end. Lin Ziming stammered a few times, and suddenly stopped talking, or he had nothing to say. Lei Wenjin is currently the top geologist in the camp, and the exploration of this deep pit is absolutely inseparable from him. If you want to go down the pit, he must be the first choice of the headquarters. It's nothing more than the headquarters has a little more process of meeting and resolution. Although there are many excellent talents in the Xinhero camp, they have not yet grown to the top level in their own fields and are not unique. And Lei Wenjin is a unique top expert, and many things can only be done by him. In fact, there are many big guys in the camp who can't do without Lei Wenjin in a certain field. For example, Hua Jun of defensive talismans, Tang Pin of psychic weapons, Liu Xianqian who studies the pineal gland, and so on. Why are those academicians considered national treasures? It's not because they are authorities or even academic cliques, but because they have reached the pinnacle in their own fields and are irreplaceable. Kyangu Mountain is more than 300 kilometers away from the camp. For the sake of confidentiality, large-scale troops will definitely not be sent out before there is no substantial discovery of the deep pit. So if nothing unexpected happens, the facts will basically be consistent with what Lei Wenjin said. After some discussion, the command decided to let Lei Wenjin go down to investigate, and at most send 2 more helicopters. It can be said that apart from wasting the time of waiting for others, there will be no difference from going down the pit now. Thinking of this, Lin Ziming hesitated for a while, and said to Lei Wenjin, "Old Lei, I have to report your proposal to Captain Lin first. This kind of thing must be agreed by the organization." Lei Wenjin nodded very readily this time. "This kind of thing must be reported to the organization. It should be. Then Lin Ziming walked to the corner and reported the situation to Lin Li. "Captain Lin, this is about the situation. What do you think?" Lin Li was processing another document just now, so he didn't pay much attention to the pictures transmitted back by the recorder. After listening to Lin Ziming's report, he was silent for a few seconds and asked, "Colonel Lin, do Director Lei and his team have enough equipment? For example, oxygen or protective ropes?" Lin Ziming nodded. He had learned about the equipment problem on the way to the cave. "Don't worry about the equipment. Director Lei and his team have been carrying out field exploration missions. They are very complete with various equipment including ropes." Lin Li stared at the tip of the ballpoint pen in his hand for a few seconds, and inexplicably felt the urge to knock Wen Qiang on the head. Then he sighed and said, "Let him go down to check the situation, but be sure to control the depth. Last time, I happened to chat with Yu Jinayan, the chief engineer in charge of the life experiment base. He told me that the depth of this kind of rope-free well should not exceed 200 meters. Since the results of the meeting will not change, it would be better for him, the general manager of the camp, to give the order directly instead of wasting time arguing." Lin Ziming nodded. "Okay, I will pay attention." After hanging up the call, Lin Ziming turned around and found Lei Wenjin, patted him on the shoulder, and looked into the deep pit. "Old Lei, get ready to go down the pit. Pay attention to safety. Captain Lin said it can't exceed 2 feet, 150 meters. Lei Wenjin laughed and patted his chest. "Okay, don't worry." Then he waved to Feng Yuhua. "Yuhua, get sabaining, oxygen tanks and protective ropes." More than half an hour later, a stable downhole equipment assembly was completed, and Lei Wenjin also put on a set of work clothes similar to frogmen and brought oxygen tanks. In addition, he also had an adjustable searchlight, a solid and a gas sampling box, a pistol just in case, and several mobile phone-sized monitoring devices. Beside the equipment components, Lei Wenjin's assistant Feng Yuhua was introducing the safety performance of the equipment to Lin Ziming. "This is a high-strength polyethylene rope made of high-modulus ultra-high molecular weight polyethylene fiber. This is the strongest rope in the world. Many bulletproof vests are also made of this material. As long as there is no problem with the supporting components on the ground, the rope will never break." Lin Ziming nodded, and his worries were slightly relieved. That's good. What he was most worried about was that Lei Wenjin accidentally broke the rope and fell into the pit. At that height, even if he had time to recite poetry, he would almost certainly die. In addition, although going down the pit theoretically would not be affected by pressure like diving, but for safety reasons, Lei Wenjin still made advanced preparations for ear pressure balance. After everything was ready, Lei Wenjin officially went down the pit. He was seen holding the safety rope tied to his abdomen with one hand, and holding the side of the pit with the other hand. The toes of his feet touched and separated the pit wall little by little, and he slowly slid down using a simple pendulum posture. When his palm touched the pit wall, Lei Wenjin could clearly feel that there were many stones similar to the ultra-basic intrusive rocks that he had broken off before in the material of the pit wall. 3 minutes later, Lei Wenjin arrived at the first marked height, -28 meters. After stopping at this position, Lei Wenjin first took out a Voc detector and scanned the surroundings. Voc detectors are often used to continuously measure toxic and harmful organic gases in dangerous or industrial environments. In addition, this equipment is also often used in the detection of hydrazine in aerospace fuel leaks. There is no need to worry about the accuracy. After a while, the detector displayed the total amount of substances and no harmful gases were detected. Lei Wenjin turned on the searchlight on his HUD while taking a breath. Click, the searchlight made a slight sound, and instantly illuminated Lei Wenjin's front so clearly that he could see clearly at a glance. What surprised him was that the stone-inlaid rock walls inside the pit wall were actually dark red, and some of them were similar to the local red soil. These dark red rock walls were neither dry nor wet, and had a very special elasticity. Elastic soil is not uncommon in the local area, but under the premise of being neither dry nor wet and not sticky, there are not many samples that can meet the requirements. Lei Wenjin then took out the sampling box and dug a small piece of soil from the rock wall. Then, just as he was about to continue going down, he was suddenly stunned. There was a footprint next to his right arm. The footprint is similar to the shape of a human arch, but its size is more than 3 times that of an ordinary person. And you can clearly tell that there are 7 toes on that footprint. I have gastroenteritis again, and I am reading a novel while on a drip. The best thing about joining the boutique group is that you can urge for updates online. Chapter 281 Abnormal Temperature and Abnormal. Lei Wenjin didn't expect it. He had just descended to the 28-meter area when he discovered such an amazing situation. What kind of concept is a footprint that is more than 3 times the length of an ordinary person? It is little known. By measuring the size of a person's footprint, it is often possible to infer the normal height. This technology is used more in criminal investigations, and the official even has some different calculation templates based on different types of shoes. In real life, we don't need to calculate too standardly. There is a more standard formula, which is adult height equals foot length at the age of 13 7 plus or minus 3 centimeters. So those basketball players tend to have larger foot sizes, while Xiaoxi's shoe size is only 36. The average adult male foot length is 22 to 26 centimeters, and the adult height is between 160 and 185. Take 70 centimeters for 3 times the foot length. Assuming that the creature that left the footprint is a human-like life, then its height is at least more than 5 meters. What's even more creepy is, how did this footprint come about? If the other party fell into the pit from the ground, it would be fine. After all, the third-level cloud-hiding talisman has been invalid for more than 60 years. Some large monkey monsters discovered this cave and fell into the deep pit during the exploration. But if the other party climbed up from below, the height of this deep pit is at least more than 100,000 meters, which is the cumulative altitude of 11 Mount Everests. The height of 5 meters indicates that the pressure on the skeleton and the energy consumption of the body of this creature are far beyond that of ordinary people. In this case, if it can still climb up from below, it really deserves the title of visitor from hell. Lei Wenjin is not a senior zoologist, but judging from some other traces around, this footprint does not seem to be a trace left when falling. Lei Wenjin quickly reported the news to the ground, and then placed the prepared monitor at this location. After he returns to the ground, other personnel will come down to make a copy of the footprint. Then he continued to descend 29 meters, 30 meters. The depth of the dive was increasing, and only the sound of the rope pulling remained in the space. However, what surprised Lei Wenjin was that he did not find the second huge footprint during the subsequent descent. This was a somewhat abnormal situation. The footprint seemed to appear out of thin air, without any origin. 50 meters. 60 meters. When he descended to 80 meters, there was only a circle of light above his head, and the surrounding area was dark and without any light. At the same time, for some reason, Lei Wenjin suddenly felt that his body was inexplicably cold, especially the exposed face area. He quickly took out a Sloan temperature gun and gently scanned the surroundings. This temperature gun is a special equipment for polar scientific research, and theoretically it can work at -90 degrees. 2 seconds later, a number was displayed on the screen of the temperature gun. 2.3 degrees. It has been introduced before. There are 3 suns around the Great Mo realm, and the outside is protected by a special membrane, so the surface temperature is constant most of the time. Although it was just learned not long ago that there would be snowfall in Yaoke, that is, there may be special environments in some areas. But the temperature in the south region basically does not change much throughout the year. At most, the temperature will drop a little during the night. This temperature difference has long been accustomed to by both the plants and creatures in the Great Mo realm. The current temperature on the ground is 27 degrees Celsius. 80 meters below the ground is a constant temperature layer, and the lowest temperature is about 20 degrees. In some places, the regional temperature may even be higher due to frequent geological activities and the transfer of energy within the Earth. If it drops below 1,000 meters, it is normal for the temperature to reach 7.80 degrees. Even if the pit has a top exit that connects to the ground, the temperature inside cannot be close to sub-zero. Lei Wenjin has been to the pits hundreds of meters deep in the local area before. Whether it is artificial or natural, the temperature cannot be so low. In other words, there must be something wrong with the temperature in the area where he is. At this time, Lin Ziming's voice came from Lei Wenjin's earphone. "Director Lei, are you okay? I saw that your heart rate and blood pressure seemed to have changed a little on the monitoring equipment." Lei Wenjin carefully felt his body and replied, "I'm fine, but the temperature at the bottom of the pit is a little low, close to 0 degrees, and the body has some feedback. Don't worry, Colonel Lin, I will take the initiative to report if I can't hold on." Lei Wenjin continued to set up the monitoring equipment while speaking. Compared with the huge footprints at -28 meters, the -80-meter area is much calmer, and no special abnormalities have been found. This is actually the norm of scientific research, boring and repetitive. Of course. It is precisely because of this boredom that every new discovery seems exciting. Then Lei Wenjin continued to descend. The frogman-like clothes he wore had a certain ability to resist heat and cold, and Lei Wenjin himself ran around every day, so his physical fitness was quite good. It is no exaggeration to say that the number of laps that the 5 rare students could run together is probably not as good as Lei Wenjin alone. Someone who was bored once did some statistics. The average life expectancy of geological engineering experts is more than 8 years higher than that of ordinary people. A few days ago, a geological expert in his 60s used his son's ID card to sign up for the 30-year-old long-distance running group and finally won the second place. What? You ask why he didn't win the first place? Because the first place was a civil engineer. This is a true story. It was precisely because of his confidence in his physical fitness that Lei Wenjin boldly continued to dive 82 meters, 86 meters, 95 meters. When Lei Wenjin descended to just over 100 meters, the surrounding temperature had dropped to -2 or 3 degrees. This time, at Lin Ziming's request, the exploration team set 3 heights: 28 meters underground, 80 meters and 150 meters. The reason why the first number is not an integer is divided into 2 reasons: superficial reasons and real reasons. The superficial reason is very simple. 28 meters is the area in the deep pit that is completely deprived of natural light, which is calculated based on the highest inclination of the sun. The real reason is, a non-integer value looks very impressive and makes people feel mysterious and powerful. But to be honest, before the exploration, no one knew that the temperature at the bottom of the pit would drop so quickly. So if nothing unexpected happens, the depth of 150 meters may not be reached 100 meters. Lei Wenjin stopped, clasped his hands together, exhaled, and rubbed his face. Just as he was holding the rock wall with one hand and preparing to continue diving, he suddenly said "dot." Then he looked at the rock wall with his left hand. The reason why Lei Wenjin felt strange was very simple. The rock wall he touched was no longer the elastic clay shape, but a hard sand and gravel surface. Obviously, the type of rock has changed. As a geologist, he must record and analyze this change, which is his professional field. However, the next second after he turned on the searchlight and looked at the rock wall, he suddenly exclaimed, "Fuck, how could it be this thing?" Note: I just found a way to solve the problem of reaching the limit for today when watching a video. After watching a video, you can return to the bookshelf page, click again and find the end of a chapter to watch the video, and you can get more coins. It is effective. You can watch 6 or 7 times, and it does not conflict with a subscription chapter. In addition, today is 815, please remember history and don't forget the national humiliation. I am still vomiting today. I barely update twice to ensure my attendance. I am too embarrassed to ask for monthly tickets, but don't vote for other books. I will update 3 times tomorrow, so remember to give it to me then. Chapter 282, Confusing. Deep in the pit, Lei Wenjin was staring at the pit wall beside him. Where his left hand touched, There was a piece of gray stone dotted with white porphyry crystals, or a complete rock wall. This rock wall began to appear about 5 or 6 meters above his head and extended downward, deep and endless. As a geologist, Lei Wenjin determined the type of rock as soon as he saw the rock wall. It was also for this reason that he was shaking with excitement all over his body, looking like Wu Laoer. However, Lei Wenjin's shaking did not last long before he was interrupted by Lin Ziming. Lin Ziming's voice rang out again from the earphone, and it was more urgent than the first time. "Director Lei, are you okay? Your blood pressure and heart rate are rising sharply and have exceeded a certain limit. Please reply immediately. Please reply immediately." Lin Ziming's shouting brought Lei Wenjin's mind back to reality. He quickly shook his head and replied quickly, "It's okay, Colonel Lin. Everything is normal here. Really okay? I saw your heart rate reached 140 on the monitor. It's really okay. I just found a special situation and I couldn't control it." "Then let me ask you, what is the topic of the Chinese composition in the 2022 college entrance examination? It's 180 years since the signing of the Baixia Treaty. Please write an essay on the changes between 1842 and 2022. Who is the most handsome man in the world? Reader, what is the name of the most pitiful author on the entire network? Novice fisherman." On the ground, Lin Ziming breathed a sigh of relief. The questions were all correct. It seemed that Lei Wenjin should not have encountered some bad things. Then he continued to ask, "Director Lei, what is the special situation you are talking about?" Deep in the pit, Lei Wenjin slightly adjusted his posture, took a deep breath, and slowly said, "Colonel Lin, I saw a lot of clip rock at my current location." Hearing this, Lin Ziming was still confused, but Lei Wenjin's assistant Feng Yuho stood up in surprise. "What? Clip rock? How? How is this possible?" Almost at the same time, several other members of Lei Wenjin's team also spoke out with surprised tones. "Oh my god, clip rock? No way, there is such a thing in the Great Mo realm?" As a modern person, Lin Ziming inevitably often goes online to eat melons, check Weibo, Tuba, B-Station, etc. In the process of eating melons online, he sometimes encounters this situation. XX Observatory took XX pictures. The industry was shocked, and wanted to celebrate with cannons, while passers-by were confused and didn't know why. Unexpectedly, now that he came to the Great Mo realm, he would still encounter this situation. Fortunately, there were other people around like Zhang Yaking who were also confused with him, which made Lin Ziming at least not so embarrassed. After a while, Feng Yuho finally noticed Lin Ziming's confused expression and hurriedly explained, "Colonel Lin, you may not understand it very well. The creep rock that Lei mentioned is a kind of rock rich in potassium, rare earth elements and phosphorus. It is a very rare rock type and has a very high research value." Lin Ziming nodded as if he understood it, and said, "I see. But even if this kind of rock is rare, isn't Director Lei's reaction a bit too extreme?" Feng Yuho shook his head, looked at Lin Ziming, and said word by word, "Colonel Lin, if you knew the origin of creep rock, you wouldn't ask this question. It is a kind of rock that only exists on the moon, and there is no place where it was formed on the earth. And so far, only sporadic breccias have been found, and typical complete blocks of creep rock have not been directly found." This time it was Lin Ziming's turn to open his eyes wide. "Fuck, are you saying that Director Lei found rocks from the moon underground, just as Feng Yuho said?" The creep rock discovered by Lei Wenjin is a type of rock from the moon. There are currently 3 types of rocks recognized as the composition of the moon: highland rocks, lunar mare basalts, and breccias. There are 2 views in the academic community about creep rock. One view is that it belongs to a branch of breccia, because the characteristics of the stone bodies collected so far are that creep rock is mostly composed of clastic rocks, and some of them are even jadeite interflocculent inside. The other view is that creep rock belongs to the 4th type of rock on the moon, formed by the impact melt breccia of anorthite. The 2 camps of views are about 50-50, and both are supported by top scholars. The reason for these 2 views is very simple, as Feng Yuho said, because humans have not yet directly discovered a complete block of creep rock. Creep rock was first discovered in a meteorite specimen. At present, there are only more than 100 lunar meteorites that can be truly studied, which is a very small number. In addition to meteorites, the source of creep rock is the channel of landing on the moon. But this channel is extremely difficult, and most countries cannot do it. At present, there are only 7 countries that have entered the lunar orbit or orbited the moon. There are only 3 countries that have actually landed on the moon with a robot. I don't need to introduce them. I'm sure you all guess who they are. At the same time, among these three countries, Russia's spacecraft landing on the moon is average, and ours is still in the process of development. For example, the lunar soil brought back by Change 5 only weighs 1,731 grams in total. It is very difficult to analyze creep rock from this limited weight. In other words, the only country in the world that can really determine the type of creep rock is Eagle, and they are not likely to share this kind of information. Because there is a precedent for this. Everyone knows what happened in 1978. At that time, Eagle sent us a piece of lunar rock specimen to show friendship. At that time, academician Yang Zian was still at the Institute of Geochemistry. One day, he suddenly received a call from the institute saying that a research team was being organized to study lunar rocks and asked him to return to the institute as soon as possible. Academician Yang got on his bicycle and rode back to the institute. Before he could catch his breath, he saw the piece of lunar rock placed in the middle of the hall. That piece of moon rock looked really big. Academician Yang had already started to imagine how many pieces this rock could be divided into and what experiments could be done with each piece. But after careful study, it was discovered that Eagle was not that generous at all. They used a convex lens to make a glass cover and put it outside the moon rock, so it looked magnified many times. How big is this moon rock actually? 1 gram. Yes, 1 gram. And even this 1 gram of moon rock was not used for research at the time. It was divided into 2 halves. 1 half of 0.5 grams, and is now on display in the Yanqing Planetarium. Yes, we also put a magnifying glass on the rock like Eagle. If you are interested, you can go and see it. The remaining half is what is really used for experiments. How many experiments can be done with such a small thing that is less than the size of a fingernail, and how many results can be obtained? It's not that frustrating. After all, we didn't spend money on the moon rock, it was given to us by others, and we were not verbally insulted or anything. But it is really disgusting, especially looking back now. So it is impossible to expect others to give you charity, and you have to rely on yourself for everything. Slow down, we have done it before. Let's go back to the topic of creep rock. In addition to its special research value, the most important thing is its origin. It comes from the moon. So the question is, why does a rock unique to the moon appear in the Great Mo world? Chapter 283 Disappearing Energy. After listening to the previous introduction, some students may feel strange. No, creep rock just does not exist on Earth. Why is it that the discovery of this kind of rock in the Great Mirror world must be related to the moon? Could it not be that the Great Mirror world also meets the conditions for the formation of creep rock and evolved on its own? This is about the particularity of creep rock. This is a special rock that needs to meet the near-Earth gravity conditions and have enough elements to be correctly generated. At present, humans have only found creep rock on the front side of the moon close to the Earth. First, let's talk about the reasons for the formation of the moon. There are many speculations about the reasons for the formation of the moon, and no one can give a definite answer to this question. Because for what happened billions of years ago, we cannot go back to that time point and cannot confirm or disprove a hypothesis. We can only approach the scene at that time through existing facts. The current key observation and detection facts are as follows. The average density of the moon, 3.34 GCM3, is much lower than that of the Earth, 5.52 GCM3, and other terrestrial planets. The overall chemical composition of the moon and the Earth is very different. For example, the moon is more deficient in volatile elements and iron-loving elements than the Earth. The Earth and the moon have the same oxygen isotope composition. The oldest highland igneous rocks on the moon are about 4.5 billion years old, indicating that they were formed or differentiated at about the same time as the Earth. There are 4 hypotheses for the formation of the moon. The first is the fission theory that it was split from the Earth. The second is the binary star theory as a sister planet formed together with the Earth. The third is the capture theory that it was captured by gravity by a star formed in another part of the solar system. The last is the large collision theory that the original Earth collided with a celestial body the size of Mars, and the resulting debris gathered to form. The generally accepted model at present is the large collision theory, which is the fourth one. This hypothesis believes that 4.5 billion years ago, a planet named Theia, which was about the same size as Mars, flowed to the vicinity of the Earth's orbit due to gravitational fluctuations and collided violently with the Earth. The Earth suffered an unprecedented disaster at that time. The whole Earth was blown to pieces and reorganized. The degree of destruction was much stronger than the impact that killed the dinosaurs. Some of the silicate and impactor fragments of the Earth that were hit stayed in orbit around the Earth, and these materials eventually gathered to form the Moon. A key data supporting this model is the current angular momentum of the Earth-Moon system, which is 3.35 times 10 to the power of 41 g, cm2/s. Considering that some of the students who are not familiar with this model failed the course seriously, I will not go into details here. In short, this data can deduce a nearly identical ancient model. At the same time, it is precisely because of this angular momentum and the material structure produced by the impact that the crepe rock has the conditions for formation. In other words, you can think of crepe rock as a rock formed by the fusion of many elements under a specific planetary environment. If you use the same elements to mix on another planet, you cannot restore this kind of rock, and you can only produce other substances. The same elements are like the outline of a work, and the planetary environment is the author. If you let Chendong write the same outline, it will be magnificent. The two supremas fight to the end of the universe, and even the avenue is trembling. The first order is tens of thousands in minutes. If it were any other idiot, it would be like a third-rate piece of writing about elementary school students fighting, and it would be difficult to even get a contract. This is what is commonly known as writing style, or the flavor in having that flavor. So crepite is a type of rock that can only be generated in the Earth-Moon system. You can't find it on Mars or Jupiter. The fact that crepite can appear under the deep pits means that either the Great Mo realm and the three main sequence stars directly have the same Earth-Moon system as the Moon, or there are other deeper reasons. At the same time, Feng Yuho on the ground continued to popularize relevant information to Lin Ximing, Colonel Lin. The specialness of crepe rock is not only its formation conditions, but more importantly its characteristics. Lin Ximing looked at Feng Yuho and asked curiously, "Oh? What are its characteristics?" Feng Yuho took a deep breath and explained, "Colonel Lin, based on the local thermal model analysis of the interior of the Moon, we can be sure of one thing. That is, the radioactive decay of potassium isotopes, thorium and uranium in crepe rock is likely to have provided a heat source for volcanic activity on the front of the Moon over billions of years. That is, it is a rock that generates heat energy, as we all know. Due to the effect of tidal locking, only one side of the Moon can face the Earth, which we usually call the front of the Moon. People standing on the Earth can never see the other side, that is, the back of the Moon. Only by flying there or using a lunar probe can we see that mysterious world. The front of the Moon is relatively flat, with a large area of lunar sea, which is the shadow we usually see on the Moon. And its back is bumpy and covered with small craters, looking like the face of King Ning. The reason for this phenomenon is very simple. The front side is where change lives and is relatively flat, while the back side is where the moon rabbit lives, which is full of rabbit poop and potholes. Ahem. Okay, let's talk about the seriousness. There are two reasons why the front side of the Moon is flat. One is that due to tidal locking, the front side is always facing the Earth, while the back side faces the vast universe, so the back side is hit by meteorites more often. In this reason, the back side of the Moon is like a knight, who uses his body to block all the hidden arrows shot at the two in order to protect the princess and the prince from falling in love. This is really a sad story. In addition to the above reasons, there is another reason that there are many volcanoes on the front side. When the basalt on the front side of the Moon is ejected, it will flow on the front side of the Moon in the form of magma, burying those meteorite craters. Just like the makeup technique, one of the three major evil arts in Asia, the pits are blocked with foundation. It has been mentioned before. Crepite is a brown-yellow glassy mineral rich in potassium, rare earth elements and phosphorus. In addition, the Moon's crepite also contains uranium and other radioactive elements. They will decay over a long period of time, releasing heat. The reason why there are so many volcanoes on the front side of the Moon is that there is a zone called the Clip Rock region in the Ocean of Storms on the front side of the Moon. The special elements contained in the clip rock provide enough heat energy for the volcano when it decays. So, a new problem arises. Let's not explore why there is clip rock under the deep pit. Just the characteristic that it can provide heat energy means that the temperature under the deep pit will not be too low. Not to mention that it can be dozens of degrees, at least it is absolutely impossible to be below zero. So where did the heat energy that should have existed go? You know, the energy level of this energy is not a small number. If this deep pit with a depth of at least 100,000 meters is all clip rock, then the energy level accumulated over the years is probably not less than the power of 100 Big Ivans. This level is enough for some countries that don't live well and like to worship ghosts to sink their islands several times. However, questions are questions, and the information that Lei Wenjin can collect has reached a certain limit. Let alone whether the headquarters agrees to go down, the sub-zero temperature is not something he can withstand. If he wants to continue the exploration, he will have to use some other machines. Machines have both advantages and disadvantages. Although the machine can go deeper, it is impossible to analyze the characteristics of the rock by feeling it like Lei Wenjin. But there is no way, many things cannot be achieved at the same time. Thinking of this, Lin Ziming turned around and said to Feng Yuhua, "Assistant Feng, please tell Director Lei to prepare to come up." Feng Yuhua nodded, and just as he was about to contact Lei Wenjin, he heard Lei Wenjin's voice suddenly come from the communicator. "Colonel Lin, I found a new situation." Lin Ziming immediately grabbed the communicator and asked, "What's the situation? Is anyone in danger?" "No one is in danger, but I found a turtle. I will try to update 3 times today, and the third update may be late. After all, everyone knows my hand speed, it is really not much faster. Please vote for the monthly ticket." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284 Blue Turtle. On the ground. Hearing Lei Wenjin's report, Lin Ziming's face showed a trace of strangeness and surprise. "What? Director Lei, you found a turtle?" "Yes, Colonel Lin. I have adjusted the angle of the recorder, and the operating table should be able to see my image here." Hearing this, Lin Ziming hurried to the operating table and asked Feng Yuhua to export the video. Considering the need for process recording, Lei Wenjin carried 2 types of recorders when he went down the pit. One is an infrared imaging night vision recorder, which is the common black and white picture in science. The other is an ordinary color high-speed camera. Although there is no direct light under the deep pit, Lei Wenjin carries a searchlight, and the color camera can still play a role under certain circumstances. For example, at this moment, Lei Wenjin sent back this color picture. "I saw a small turtle crawling in a crack in the rock wall about half a body below Lei Wenjin. This turtle looks about the size of an ordinary person's palm, with a black shell and blue limbs and head. The little turtle's head, tail and forelegs were all spread out, clinging to the rock wall like a snail, but its eyes were dull and its body showed no movement. It was as if it was frozen." Then Lin Ziming asked, "Director Lei, is this turtle still alive?" "Colonel Lin, wait a moment," Lei Wenjin hurriedly replied, and then the video screen first shook and made a rattling sound, as if something was taken out of the backpack. After about half a minute, Lei Wenjin replied, "Colonel Lin, I used a thermal imaging camera to detect it, and this turtle seems to have no signs of life. Of course, it is not ruled out that its shell has some effect of blocking thermal imaging detection. After all, most of the equipment we prepared is exploration equipment, and the level of life detection is relatively not that sufficient." Lin Ziming nodded, and he also knew what Lei Wenjin said. Considering the width of the pit and the limited space for helicopters, only a small part of the equipment they carried this time was life detection equipment, and most of them were prepared for organisms with obvious life signs. In the field of low activity such as qualitative suspended animation or death, there is indeed no sufficiently accurate identification ability. Then Lin Ziming said to Lei Wenjin, "Director Lei, how about this? You go back to the ground first, and let Xiao Liu and the others go down to pick this turtle." Lei Wenjin did not insist this time, and agreed very readily, "No problem, I'll go up now." Although Lei Wenjin is experienced in exploration, this turtle has already involved biological samples, which is completely different from geological exploration. If Lei Wenjin rashly collects it himself, it is likely that he will damage the sample because of his lack of business skills. What if the turtle is in a state of suspended animation, flees after being startled, or even attacks actively? Then Lei Wenjin may be in danger of his life. These days, rabbits are burnt on the outside and black on the inside, so it is normal for a turtle to be poisonous. Experts like Lei Wenjin are national treasures, and their talent value goes without saying. If there is a loss in this link, it would be a big loss. Lei Wenjin obviously understands this very well, so from the time he found the turtle until now, he has never tried to get started. As for whether the turtle will run away if someone else goes down, it's a joke. Lei Wenjin's movements were not small when he came down. He stayed at this location for a long time to report the situation of creep rock, and even knocked down a few samples manually. In this case, the turtle was not alarmed. Even if it is really a living thing, the probability of being scared away is not very high. After the two sides communicated their intentions, Lei Wenjin left a locator at this location, and then began to be stretched upwards. After about 15 minutes, Lei Wenjin successfully returned to the ground and handed over the collected rock samples. Afterwards, Lei Wenjin was not allowed to move freely, but put on a protective suit and was taken to a movable airborne single-person isolation room. No one knows whether there is any contamination under the deep pit. It is certain that this deep pit is definitely not ordinary, and there is a high probability that there is some kind of civilization node-level secret hidden. If this kind of deep pit is put in a Cthulhu novel, it would have to be prefixed with unspeakable and then given a boss like a tentacle monster. Therefore, in theory, it has a certain possibility of physical or mental infection. Of course. Another reason is that Lei Wenjin has been running around for so long, and Lin Ziming wanted to find an excuse to let him rest. So this single isolation room came in handy naturally. Next, Lei Wenjin will be transported back to the camp like a cargo. As for how many days it will take, it all depends on the organization's arrangements. In short, Lei Wenjin has no room for resistance. At least before confirming that the air and soil samples in the depths are fine, he will definitely not be cancelled from the observation status. Plan past JPG. After Lei Wenjin returned to the ground, Lin Ziming arranged for the Special Forces soldier Liu Ming to go down the deep pit and sample the turtle into a high-strength container box. Today's Special Forces training programs basically include important skills in various fields, so Liu Ming's ability to pick biological samples is not a big news. In fact, if you think about it, those top soldiers who sneak into the enemy's important strongholds, if they don't have some physical, chemical and biological sampling skills, wouldn't it be a wasted trip? Of course, those small movies about infiltrating search officers are not included. In short, today's special forces are all skilled in the 8th level of technicians. They can directly become chief engineers in the Four Sons shop. Their skills are very good. Last year, a brother went to the west for a self-driving tour. His car broke down on the edge of the no man's land. He happened to meet a team of special forces soldiers stationed in training. At that time, 2 soldiers repaired the brother's car with their bare hands. It was amazing. The situation this time was quite similar. Liu Ming didn't spend much effort to put the turtle into the collection container. After returning to the ground, Liu Ming handed the container to Lin Ziming. This container is an FJ-79 level biological container, which is the same kind of containment material that originally carried Huazaya ammo. It can withstand the shooting of 79 type sniper rifle bullets, and its internal and external defenses are extremely strong. Now, this container has been reinforced by Patriarch Wei. It is estimated that it will be difficult for ordinary 3rd level monsters to break it for a while. So Lin Ziming observed the turtle with relative peace of mind. At this time, the turtle was lying on its back in the container with its 4 legs up in the air, motionless. Its eyes as big as green beans were dull, and its blue body was extremely conspicuous. Most of the local turtles are dark brown or black, and the rare ones are golden or dark red. At present, in addition to the colorful turtles painted by internet celebrities, only 2 other blue turtles have this appearance, a very small number of large flower diamond turtles and Squirtle. Ahem. The large flower diamond turtle is a soda jellyfish, and its limbs are generally gray. However, there are many subspecies of it, and many blue subspecies individuals have been found. But the limbs of those blue large flower diamond turtles are a bit like the plasticine played by children, without much elasticity and vitality. But this blue turtle is different. Its limbs and head are extremely crystal blue, and it looks almost like a crystal diamond except that it cannot be seen through. The fact that this blue turtle can appear under the deep pit means that its origin must be unusual, and it is not ruled out that it is some kind of demon beast. However, Lin Ziming and his team do not have sufficient scientific research conditions at the moment, so they can only send it back to the camp for research. At almost the same time, the local L-17 training room was almost completed. Note, I will recommend it immediately. I had an in-depth chat with the editor for more than an hour and I was deeply touched. I will not update 3 times today. I thought of a very interesting plot and need to change the outline. The agreed 3-day update will start from tomorrow. Why does my tone sound like I am asking for leave? Obviously, I update nearly 6,000 words every day, and the minimum update is half more than many authors. It seems that something went wrong. 0.0. Chapter 285. The way family returns to their homeland. From the perspective of nature, the discovery of the Kyangu mountain pit is not insignificant. Whether it is a depth of more than 100,000 meters, or footprints, clip rock and blue turtles, all indicate that there must be some unknown secrets hidden in its depths. However, since Kyangu mountain is more than 300 kilometers away from the camp, there is more than one city between the two, and it is difficult to travel back and forth without revealing the whereabouts. In addition, the deep pit is still in a static state for the time being, and there are no underground people, monsters, SpongeBob SquarePants and other things running out. Therefore, after the command center asked Lin Ziming to send clip rock, footprint rubbings and turtles back to the base for research, it did not rush to start the bottom exploration of the deep pit immediately 100,000 meters underground. This is a depth that humans have never touched. To put it bluntly, it takes some time just to prepare the rope. Therefore, according to the command center's idea, the camp will spend about a week to carry out the preliminary preparations. For example, a more powerful rangefinder, a bottom exploration robot with strong signal transmission capability, etc. After these materials are prepared, the camp will carry out the first round of mechanized exploration. At that time, the exploration team will try to first clearly detect the height of the deep pit, whether it is more than 100,000 meters, 200,000, 300,000 or even deeper, and then try to see if there are any other research possibilities. While Lin Ziming and others sent the samples back to the camp, the L-17 training room on the local side also officially arrived at the day of completion. Some time ago, the local side conducted qualification tests on a total of 300,000 soldiers. At that time, a total of more than 60,000 people with 4 spiritual roots or above were detected, and after a detailed round of selection, the core layer finally determined the first batch of 50,000 people. According to the plan formulated by the core layer, except for Chen Rong and Wang Jinsong, 2 single spiritual root soldiers who will be sent to the Damo realm, the remaining 49,998 soldiers will temporarily practice in the local area. After more than 2 months of material transportation, the amount of high-purity compressed spiritual energy stored in the local area has exceeded more than 3 million cubic meters, which is enough for 50,000 key training practitioners to continue practicing for 2 months. In addition, a large amount of L-17 spiritual energy is still transported through the light gate every day, and the spiritual energy reserves are sufficient and sustainable. Therefore, the first phase of the local cultivation plan that the core layer has been planning for a long time finally officially started in the first month of the new year. Needless to say, the spiritual energy used in local cultivation, the elixirs needed are mainly Kailingdan and Qingaiyandan, which are commonly used in the key training period. Kailingdan, a kind of elixir, had been cracked and mass-produced 2 months ago, and the standard Harbin Pharmaceutical 6-brand small blue bottle. Qingaiyandan is an elixir that is a bit special. Its specialness is not that it is difficult to refine, but because it is too cheap. For this kind of elixir, you only need to put all the medicinal materials into the alchemy furnace and then use the spiritual energy to roll the pills. Even the Y particles of the ground vein fire are not needed. It can be refined at the first level of key training. Of course, its efficacy is also relatively limited. It is similar to the nature of lubricating oil. It can only make you enter more easily. As for the quality, it depends on whether you are a normal person or a lun. In the Dhamma world, the sale of Qingaiyandan is basically based on tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands, and the price is only 1/20th or 1/30th of Kailingdan. Therefore, the rabbits did not spend their limited productivity to produce Qingaiyandan. Instead, they chose to buy a large number of finished pills at the transit station of Lanidan City and transported them directly back to their homeland. Anyway, there are no public intellectuals in the Great Mo world who say we can't even produce something as simple as a ballpoint pen tip, so there is no need to destroy their jobs. In addition to materials, the most critical issue for local cultivation is the selection of teachers. Han Yuzan Teachers says, scholars must have teachers, and teachers are responsible for imparting knowledge and solving doubts. Cultivation is an extremely profound field. Although most of the exercises rely on the practitioner's own perception ability, many keynotes still require professional teachers to solve doubts. For example, in which part of the camp the spiritual energy is running a little slow, the mobilization of the inner sea breath, etc. At present, The highest realm in the camp is Xiao Yi and Yuan Lao. They broke through to the 6th level of key training a few days ago, which is completely different from the other people in the camp, just like the gap between Messi and Ronaldo and ordinary players. This progress is naturally not slow, but from any perspective, neither of them is suitable to return to their homeland to be a teacher. First of all, it is easy to delay their own cultivation. Secondly, they are standard genius upgrades, and geniuses are often not suitable to be teachers. This involves a universal problem. To put it bluntly, teaching is copying. Geniuses and most ordinary people often do not have the same brain waves. If the format is wrong, they cannot be copied. For example, Wei Donggai, a genius from Yan, became popular some time ago because of holding a steamed bun. Wei Donggai's genius and ability are naturally needless to say, but his teaching quality is not so ideal, and his failure rate ranks last among the 11 classes. This is the difference in universality. Problems that ordinary people think are very difficult are often just this in the eyes of geniuses, so many key links are subconsciously skipped by them. Other teachers can cover the content of 3 classes, but they may finish it in 20 minutes, and students are naturally confused. It's like teaching people to cook, with a pile of raw ingredients on the left, and then saying a few words, and directly serving a full banquet on the right. The shining field of geniuses like Wei Donggai is at the forefront of scientific research. His template is Lu Chaoyuan, not Xian Liren. For the same reason, the headquarters, after much discussion, finally decided on the instructor for this local teaching, Wei Fan. Wei Fan is a 3 spiritual root practitioner. As the current patriarch of the Wei family, he is very experienced in coordinating and handling problems. This has been confirmed in the process of guiding other soldiers in the camp to practice. There is almost no routine practice problem that Wei Fan cannot solve. In addition, his Mandarin level has now exceeded 95% of Fujianese, and he has mastered basic surfing skills. Basically, it can be said that there is not much difference between him and the local residents. Therefore, the headquarters' decision to appoint him as the instructor is not a very unexpected appointment. As for the possible abnormalities that may occur when the natives of the Great Mo realm come to the mainland, this was tested more than 4 months ago when Wei Tu and Wei Ziaateo came to the mainland, and there was no problem. 3 days later, outside the Light Gate, Lin Ziming took Wei Fan through the Light Gate and returned to the mainland from the Great Mo realm. This is also the first time that the adult descendants of the Traversers have returned to the mainland since Wei Ziming and others traveled through it for more than 170 years. There are no flowers, and no elementary school students lined up. There were no long guns and cannons around the stars as they did when they were walking on the notice. The only thing that recorded this memorable moment was the 24-hour non-stop recorder outside the Light Gate. At this time, the Light Gate had been built into a closed construction site. The high-rise buildings of the Magic City could not be seen from the inside. The original buildings had been removed and turned into flat ground, where various materials were placed. The whole scene looked no different from the life experiment base in the Great Mo realm. But for some reason, Wei Fan's hands were inexplicably trembling. This was the hometown that the Ziming ancestor had never forgotten until his death. As a direct descendant born in the main line of the Wei family, Wei Fan's ancestors were all authentic Chinese people. His great-ancestor was Wei Jizhong, the eldest son of Wei Ziming and Lin Lijiao, and his great-grandmother was the youngest daughter born to Cheng Shiking and his wife in the Great Mo realm. The great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather after that were also like this. Basically all of them were intermarriages between the descendants of Chinese time travelers. Wei Fan was not a person who only believed in blood. Even before the rabbits appeared, he could not even speak Chinese very well. Now some of the Wei family members have begun to intermarry with the natives of the Great Mo realm. This would never happen without the consent of the old patriarch Wei and Wei Fan. But this is inevitable under the general environment. Not to mention Wei Fan, even Wei Ziming did not expect to go home again one day. Deep in Wei Fan's heart, he has never denied or forgotten the origins of his ancestors. This can be seen from the performance of Wei Fan when he saw the 5-star red flag during the siege. He still remembers what the ancestor Wei Ziming said, "We are wanderers who have left home. Now the wanderers have returned home." Chapter 286 Request. Outside the Light Gate, Wei Fan, who returned to his hometown for the first time, did not stay near the Light Gate for too long. He and Lin Ziming were taken to a testing point by a service staff. After a detailed round of blood tests and ultraviolet disinfection, They were taken into a corridor and turned around many times, and finally arrived outside Qin Hendong's office, where they met Qin Hendong, who had been waiting for a long time. Seeing the two people entering, Qin Hendong took the initiative to step forward and patted Lin Ziming on the shoulder. "Colonel Lin, we meet again, welcome back." Then he turned around, his smile slightly restrained, and politely extended his hand to Wei Fan. "Hello, Chief Wei, I am Qin Hendong. Chief Wei is not a member of our official system, just call me Mr. Qin." Wei Fan hurriedly shook hands with him. The first real alien visitor in the local area was connected to the head of the organization. "Hello, Mr. Qin, I am Wei Fan." In the past period of time, Wei Fan has gradually become familiar with the handshake etiquette of the rabbits, and even vaguely mastered the difference in strength when shaking hands at different levels. So there was nothing awkward about the meeting between the two, such as holding each other's wrists and shaking them around. At the same time, on the way here, Wei Fan also learned about Qin Hendong's identity from Lin Ziming. Although he was still a little unfamiliar with the levels of the rabbits, for example, he still didn't understand why Director Fu might be the director, but Director Zhang might be the deputy director. But in addition to the concept of level, there is another way to intuitively judge the size of a person's power. That is the population under jurisdiction. The population of Qi County City was only more than 17,000 before the siege, and this number still includes the thousands of refugees who fled some time ago. Now, with the progress of the collection project, the total population in the city has barely exceeded 70,000 a few days ago. According to Lin Ziming's introduction, the population under Qin Hendong's jurisdiction is as high as more than 24 million. Counting some people who don't have temporary residence permits, the total number may even be close to 30 million. 30 million people. What does this mean? This number is more than 1/3 of the population of the entire southern region. You know, the Damo realm is benchmarked against the entire Earth. It is rumored that there is an imperial city built by the Huashan realm in the eastern region of the Damo realm, and there are Yuanying realm in every generation. The population of the largest city in the legendary Damo realm is only in the tens of millions. The local city is really worthy of the word horrible. And being able to govern such a large local population, Qin Hendong's status can be seen. So in front of Qin Hendong, Wei Fan seemed a little embarrassed. On the other side, looking at the two people talking freely, Lin Ziming felt inexplicably regretful and fortunate. The so-called regret refers to the meeting between Qin Hendong and Wei Fan, which can be regarded as the most special foreign affairs meeting in the history of the local area. Before that, whether it was the meeting with Eagle or John Bull, it was a multinational meeting. How could it be of great significance across the world? Unfortunately, due to confidentiality reasons, this scene will probably not be revealed until a long time later. As for the fortunate part, it is that I have become a direct witness of this scene. Perhaps many years later, there will be a multiple-choice question on the college entrance examination paper about who is the third person present at the first meeting between the local and alien leaders, which is worth 6 points. In a sense, this can also be regarded as a name left in history. The site returns to the original place. In the office, Qin Hendong was introducing the situation on the homeland to Wei Fan. Patriarch Wei, on behalf of the organization, I welcome your arrival and also welcome our wandering wanderers to return home. Unfortunately, due to confidentiality issues, you and the existence of the Great Mo realm cannot be made public for the time being. I hope you can understand this. Wei Fan nodded and replied, "Don't worry, Captain Lin Li has already told me about these situations before coming here. I will follow the arrangements of the homeland." Qin Hendong nodded with satisfaction after hearing this. Just as Wei Fan said, before coming to the homeland, he had already learned in detail with Lin Li about the mission process and which sensitive confidential information was included. Although the core layer has now opened up cultivation to the 50,000 selected warriors, the existence of the Great Mo realm is still in a confidential stage, and not much will be revealed even to the inside. It's not that the core layer will make up another excuse, but it will not take the initiative to mention the origin of the exercises, elixirs, and spiritual energy. When the warriors are qualified to contact the next stage of cultivation, this information will naturally be unsealed. Wei Fan's identity to the outside world is that he is an instructor from a high-level position, serving in a certain special forces unit, and is the first person to come into contact with cultivation. Anyway, with Wei Fan's physical fitness that is even more terrible than the governor, let alone the special forces, it's not wrong to say that he is from outer space. It seems that he is really from outer space? In the office, seeing that the communication between the two sides was very smooth, Qin Hendong continued, Patriarch Wei, according to the plan made by the core layer. The 50,000 warriors we selected this time will not gather together for training. After all, it is troublesome to mobilize 50,000 people. We adopt the distribution of nearby. You may not understand that the situation here is quite special. It is not necessary to fight, but some people always like to stare at us and disgust us whenever they have nothing to do. This time we have divided 3 training bases, and the distance between them cannot be said to be very close. It will take about a few hours by plane. So your next days in the homeland may be busy, and some schedules may be slightly tight and not so free. Wei Fan nodded, still very cooperative. No problem, I am mentally prepared for these things. Then he paused, and a hint of hesitation appeared on his face. Mr. Qin, I have no objection to the arrangements here in the hometown, but I have a request. I don't know if you can agree to it. Qin Hendong still attaches great importance to Wei Fan's personal emotions. Hearing this, he hurriedly asked, Oh? What request? Patriarch Wei, just say it, I want to go back to Patriarch Siming's hometown to have a look. Seeing that Qin Hendong was a little dazed, Wei Fan added, This is an idea that my father and I discussed before we set off, so I didn't have time to tell Captain Lin and the others. When our Wei Mansion and Grandpa Wang signed the agreement, I heard Grandpa Wang mention one thing. Before the current light gate appeared, the flow of time in the two worlds was not the same. It has been more than 170 years since Patriarch Siming traveled to the Dhamma realm, but only 14 years have passed on his native land. I asked Captain Lin and the others to check the archives before and confirmed that Patriarch Siming's parents are still alive. So, I want to go and see them. Something happened at home. I'll try to update 3 times a day. I've postponed it twice. I feel embarrassed to postpone it again. Chapter 287 Wei Fan's local experience. I want to go back to the hometown of the Siming ancestor. In the office, Qin Hendong and Lin Ximing both showed a slightly strange look on their faces when they heard Wei Fan's words. To be honest. In fact, a long time ago, the organization had considered the possibility of the Wei Mansion making such a request. After all, as the Wei Mansion's exchanges with a local area became closer, it was almost inevitable that such a request would be made. It was nothing more than whether the person who made it was Wei Fan or the old master of the Wei family. It was precisely for this reason. Wei Siming's younger brother Wei Xian was sent to the Dhamma realm by the core layer a long time ago, and was tested to have a pretty good 3 spiritual roots. He is currently responsible for the population statistics task of Yangbai City. According to the original plan of the command center, Wei Xian's identity would be made public to everyone in the Wei Mansion at an appropriate time. But later, Wei Xian was unwilling to enjoy the preferential treatment after his identity was exposed, so he showed a strong desire to oppose it, and the organization shelved this idea indefinitely. Therefore, Wei Fan didn't know that he had actually met and even talked with his ancestor's younger brother. So from an objective point of view, Wei Fan's request was not excessive, and it was even later than the headquarters expected. After all, acknowledging one's ancestors is an instinct engraved in the blood of every Chinese. But instinct is instinct, and the Wei family's matter is really not reasonable. You can imagine, Wei's father and mother, who are in their 50s, are working in the fields, and a few old men with white beards like Gandalf fly over from afar. When they meet, they kneel down in front of you and tell you that they are your great-great-great-grandsons. This scene is really too sanity-destroying. Even in the core layer where think tanks gather, it is difficult to make a decision easily on such issues involving logic and ethics. Because this matter needs to take into account the emotions and wishes of Wei's father and mother, no one can say whether they can accept such exciting news after losing their eldest son for more than 10 years. Perhaps they noticed the strange entangled expressions of Qin Hendong and the others. Wei Fan thought about it and soon realized the crux of the matter, so he quickly added, Mr. Qin, maybe there's something wrong with my expression. What I mean is that I just need to go and see the 2 old people unilaterally. There is no need to reveal my identity to them, and the existence of the Wei family can be kept secret for the time being. In addition, if there is a chance, can the tomb of ancestor Siming be moved back to the mainland? After all, this is also one of his last wishes. Hearing Wei Fan mention Wei Siming, Qin Hendong's face couldn't help but become more serious. He thought carefully, and finally said, Patriarch Wei, I will report Comrade Wei Siming's last wish to the core level truthfully. I can assure you that our comrade will return home as he wishes. It's just that the specific process and the location after the relocation will definitely not be solved in a short time. The whole process will take a certain amount of time, so we need to discuss a plan. As for your proposal to visit Comrade Wei Siming's parents, Qin Zhendong hesitated for a few seconds, and finally made up his mind and said, I will try my best to facilitate this matter. When the time comes, we will decide on the method based on the situation. Perhaps we will visit Comrade Wei Siming's parents at home in the form of routine condolences. In short, Patriarch Wei, you just need to wait for notification at any time. I will reply to you within 3 days. Hearing this, Lin Ziming immediately gave Wei Fan a hidden look, indicating that he could rest assured. Although Qin Zhendong said try to facilitate, this is just the habitual rigor of people in the system. When a big boss of his level says this, it is basically equivalent to guarantee, and the credibility is extremely high. Afterwards, Qin Zhendong and Wei Fan discussed some other issues, and the first meeting between the two sides ended. There was still no press conference, no luxurious dinner. There was only a box of Red Panda cigarettes given by Qin Zhendong. After leaving this office, Lin Ziming and Wei Fan were taken to an open area on the construction site and left a closed construction site in a truck. From the outside, this truck is just an ordinary van, but in fact there are many service personnel accompanying it. Wuling Hongguang, it is not news that it can fit 7 or 8 people. These service personnel will be responsible for Lin Ziming and the others' itinerary all the way to the practice base. According to the arrangement of the base camp, they will set off from the Magic City to Baixia, take a special plane through a secret transfer station, and finally arrive at the largest practice base. And this process inevitably passes through the urban area of the Magic City. Therefore, as soon as the vehicle left the construction site, Wei Fan saw a scene he had never seen in his life. The vehicle was driving on a wide asphalt concrete road. Although the lane was a one-way street, the width was at least 20 meters. At this moment, various vehicles were constantly passing through this lane, which was wider than the main road of Qi County. Lin Ziming was introducing it enthusiastically. After all, since he went to the Great Mo realm, this was his first time to return to the urban area of the Magic City. Patriarch Wei, the luxury car with a 3-pointed star in a circle is called Mercedes-Benz. The inverted trapezoid on the side that is divided into 4 parts is Roe. The green license plate means that it is a new energy vehicle, and it is usually driven by an outside online car-hailing driver. There seems to be a car accident in front. Oh, it's okay then. As Lin Ziming introduced it, Wei Fan's vision continued to spread outward. At this time, the vehicle turned a corner and came to a junction. On the streets on both sides of the lane are rows of modern buildings, including clothing stores, snack bars, milk tea shops, genuine Itun's pedicure room, etc. At the end of the field of vision, you can also see several tall buildings that soar into the sky. In addition, on the pedestrian walkway where the building and the lane meet, there are a large number of pedestrians coming and going, which is very lively. These passers-by are men and women, old and young, some wearing thick winter clothes, and some ignoring the severe cold and showing their smooth thighs. But no matter what the gender, age, and clothing of these pedestrians are different, they have one thing in common: they are all very healthy. Perhaps some of them look a little depressed because of the pressure of work or the frustration of life, and they seem a little numb and lifeless. But their body shape and face are normal. Unlike the civilians in the Great Mo realm, they are not as haggard, pale and thin, leaning against a corner of the wall weakly, without any vitality. It can be seen that these people are definitely not short of food and clothing in terms of living conditions. Looking at the scenes in front of him, Wei Fan was shocked and couldn't help muttering in a low voice, "Is this the prosperous age that Ancestor Siming talked about?" Lin Ziming, who was standing aside, heard this, glanced at him gently, and said with some sigh, "Prosperous age? It depends on the person. For those who have experienced hardships, now is a well-deserved prosperous age, a paradise they dream of. But for those who were born in peacetime, everyone's judgment is different." Wei Fan looked at him curiously and asked, "So, Colonel Lin, what do you think? Do you think today's local area is a prosperous age?" Lin Ziming thought seriously for a while and said, "If it is a prosperous age, then count it, but I think it can only be regarded as the beginning of a prosperous age, which is far from perfect. We have only solved a basic problem of food and clothing, and there are still deficiencies and even lesions here and there. To be honest, there are some things that make people like me feel angry. But although the leeches encountered when crossing mountains and ridges are troublesome, they can be pulled out as long as you bleed a little and feel a little pain. The real fatal thing on the road ahead is not the leeches, but that you took the wrong road. You were supposed to go up the mountain but walked to the cliff, then you are doomed. Fortunately, the direction we are heading in is correct, and that is enough. Of course. Chief Wei, you have just arrived in the local area. There is no use for me to say many things. You have to see them with your own eyes. But if you ask me, you are also very lucky. Wei Fan blinked. Colonel Lin, why do you say I am lucky? Because you are about to meet a group of the cutest and most respectable people. The third update is here. Please vote for me. Actually, there is nothing big at home, just that my grandfather is in the hospital and I have to stay with him overnight. Not only are the fees of accompanying nannies expensive, but they also don't accept orders that last for about a week. My mom has to stay at home with grandma and help her get up at night, so my dad and I have to take turns to take care of grandpa. This means that I have less time to type. I type as slowly as a snail on my phone. But I still promise to update 3 times today, and I will try my best to update 3 times tomorrow. After all, I have to keep my promise. Chapter 288, Jumang Training Base. One day later. In a very secluded forest in the western region. Beep beep, a military helicopter slowly landed on the helipad. A moment later, Lin Ziming and Wei Fan walked out of the helicopter. After nearly 24 hours of non-stop inspection and transfer, they finally arrived at this local practice base codenamed Jumang. And just as they left the cabin, Feng Xiachen, director of the National Major Technical Equipment Office, who had been waiting here for a long time, quickly came up with another middle-aged man. Director Feng had never dealt with Lin Ziming before, and this was the first time they met, so Director Feng's expression looked very formal. He took the initiative to extend his hand, his slightly weather-beaten face full of solemnity. Hello, Colonel Lin, Chief Wei, I am Feng Xiachen from the Heavy Equipment Office. Lin Ziming held Director Feng's hand and shook it up and down. Director Feng, I've heard a lot about you. I've heard more than once about the 1 million tons of ethylene battle you led your team to carry out. It really boosted our national prestige. It was truly an amazing feat. Upon hearing Lin Ziming mention his proudest achievement, Director Feng's face showed some surprise, and the originally slightly hard facial lines softened a bit. He smiled shyly and waved his hand a little embarrassedly. A hero does not talk about his past achievements. Compared with the big things we are going to do now, let alone millions of tons of ethylene, even hundreds of millions of tons are not enough. The ethylene project can only be regarded as a foundation in the industrial field. Once our cultivation project is fruitful, it will benefit generations to come. To be honest, I can't wait to see the day when it is popularized by all people. Director Feng's first half of the sentence was polite, but the second half was his sincere meaning. Looking at the light in the eyes of this old man who had made great contributions to China's heavy industry, Lin Ziming pursed his lips and nodded heavily. Don't worry, that day will definitely come. Director Feng patted Lin Ziming's shoulder with satisfaction, and everything was self-evident. Then he turned around and greeted Wei Fan, then pointed to the middle-aged man beside him and said, Colonel Lin, Chief Wei, let me introduce you. The man next to me is the general manager of the Jumang Training Base, Supervisor Huo Xiaoping. In the future, all issues related to the material dispatch of the training base will be handled by him, and I will mainly be responsible for supervising personnel issues. Lin Ziming nodded in understanding, and took Wei Fan to shake hands with Huo Xiaoping one after another. After saying hello, the 4 of them walked towards the base under the leadership of Director Feng. The entrance to the base is on the side of a mountain, and the main body of the entire base is located inside the mountain. After entering the base, Director Feng first pointed to the top of his head and introduced, our base is surrounded by dense forests, and we have laid special camouflage nets, so the confidentiality is still very reliable. Camouflage nets are a standard item for preventing satellite photography, and their love-hate relationship with satellites can be traced back decades ago. At the beginning, remote sensing satellites used visible light imaging technology. Therefore, as long as the camouflage barrier simulates green plants, it can basically avoid being photographed, which is the common camouflage appearance. But today's remote sensing satellites already have invisible light imaging technology, which is the near-infrared commonly used in military reconnaissance. Near-infrared is not affected by weather and day and night, and the target to be detected can be detected 24 hours a day. Ordinary camouflage nets are no longer useful. Therefore, if you want to simulate the same near-infrared reflection characteristics as real green plants, you must add a layer of military-specific near-infrared paint coating to the camouflage. This coating is very valuable, and 1 square meter basically starts at a few hundred yuan, and even thousands or tens of thousands. Of course, the effect is naturally quite good. How does the saying go? The only disadvantage of expensive things is that they are expensive. After introducing the external situation, Director Feng continued to introduce the internal structure of the base. The original body of our Jumang base was a special energy storage center during the 3-line depth plan period. It has been the highest secret level so far, and the confidentiality measures are extremely complete. At the same time, because some energy transportation and storage require pipelines, the wires and pipes inside the center can be said to be very developed, which can be used to transport spiritual energy. The entire base covers an area of more than 40 acres, of which 3/4 are inside the mountain. Our base is the largest of the 3 initial practice bases, and naturally has the largest number of personnel. There are more than 24,000 soldiers in the entire base, of which the proportion of dual spiritual roots has reached 60% of the local dual spiritual roots. Considering the privacy of practice, we have allocated a single room to each soldier, so that the efficiency of practice after class will not be affected by having a roommate. However, due to time and resource issues, the area of the single room will be relatively small, only about 8 square meters. In addition, there are 2 large indoor activity fields, 3 canteens, and several basketball, football, badminton courts, etc. in the base. As for the training room, it is underground. There are single training rooms and public training areas. The specific arrangements will be made according to the progress of each soldier. At the beginning, the soldiers will practice in the public training area. When they reach the key nodes of each realm, they can apply to break through in the training room. Compared with the public area, the training room not only has L17 spiritual energy, but also some spirit gathering arrays purchased at a high price by the Xinhao camp. Therefore, the training effect will be stronger. After hearing this, Lin Ziming suddenly asked, Director Feng, more than 20,000 soldiers were transferred at once. Won't their comrades have questions? It was mentioned before. The reason why the core layer built 3 training bases was mainly to prevent more than 50,000 soldiers from being deployed to a certain area at the same time, so that some people would attract unnecessary attention. Now that the 3 bases have been built, the soldiers can reach the base according to the principle of proximity. The journey is short and the personnel are dispersed. Naturally, it is not easy to attract the attention of the outside world. But the situation outside is one thing, and the internal situation is another. When comrades find that acquaintances have been transferred, and nearby classes or even companies have disappeared, it will more or less cause some internal discussions. It is not appropriate to suppress such voices blindly. How did the headquarters solve it? Note, thanks to the mysterious Brook boss. There are currently 4 bosses for this book. Among them, Royan boss rewarded twice, and 5 more chapters equals 15 chapters. In June and July, the bosses of Lai boss and Yin boss were added. Royan boss added 4 chapters, so there are still 2 chapters from Royan boss and 3 chapters from Brook boss, a total of 5 chapters. In addition, there are still 65 chapters out for the average subscription and monthly tickets, so why did I set the rule of 1 chapter for every 100 average subscriptions? I am exhausted from staying up all night. I overestimated my energy. There's still tonight. Chapter 289 Official Start of Local Cultivation. Inside the Jumang base. Hearing Lin Ziming's question, Director Feng smiled and said, Colonel Lin, you don't have to worry too much about this. According to the arrangement of the headquarters, we started this year's field training in advance a week ago, and at the same time broke up the organization of the training troops, that is, mixed cooperation between different troops. After all, training is to train various combat modes, which is not as formal as exercises. After disrupting all the organizations, we began to gradually draw soldiers who came to practice. For troops with relatively dense personnel, even the teams were separated. With tens of thousands of people in the open field training, the organization was also disrupted. It is normal that you don't meet an acquaintance in a few months. In addition, communication equipment cannot be used during the training. When the training ends, it happens to be the conscription in March, and it will be even easier for new recruits to join the army. so you don't have to worry about confidentiality. It is very safe inside and outside. After listening to Director Feng's introduction, Lin Ziming nodded with some relief. Lin Ziming and the others were talking about the issue of personnel deployment, and Wei Fan on the side did not interrupt. He just listened quietly while they were talking, and looked at the practice base and the mountain with some curiosity. Hollowing out a mountain, this kind of large project is not common in the demo world. After all, the labor cost is not proportional to the profit after the project is completed. High-level practitioners would rather flatten a mountain than spend the effort to hollow it out. This can be regarded as one of the advantages of industrialization. Since coming to the mainland, Wei Fan has indeed gained a lot of knowledge in infrastructure. The interior of the base looks very technological. The width of the passage for several people is no less than 10 meters. The ground, walls and ceiling are all made of silver metal. A group of people walking in the passage can clearly hear the crisp footsteps. At the same time, Director Feng was still introducing other aspects. All the soldiers in the Jumang base have signed the agreement. They will practice in a completely closed environment for no less than 2 years in the base. Of course, they don't know the information about practice yet. They only know that they are going to carry out a long-term mission. Soldiers have to practice regular practice for 9 hours every day. They can continue to meditate in their single dormitories in the remaining time, or play games through the internal network or go to the sports field to relax. If you want to know about recent events, you can read the news, but you can only browse and cannot comment. In addition, each soldier has half an hour of call time every week, and those with girlfriends can apply for 10 minutes more. All calls are the same as the mode of the members of the Xinhao camp. They are also communicated through our dedicated channels, and each call recording will be reviewed and backed up in real time. The discipline is indeed a bit strict, but this is a necessary link. The soldiers are also prepared, and they signed after being informed of the relevant matters. The few people talked all the way, and during the period, Huo Xiaoping also talked about some matters about the transportation of materials in the base, which was considered to be an introduction to the general situation of the Jumang base. 10 minutes later, everyone came to an alloy door. Director Feng pointed at the door and said, "Colonel Lin, Chief Wei, this is our first public training area, and the soldiers are already in place." Hearing this, Lin Ziming couldn't help but look at Wei Fan and asked, "Chief Wei, are you ready?" Although he knew on the way here that he would become the instructor of more than 20,000 soldiers, when this scene was really about to happen, Wei Fan found that he was still a little nervous. Fortunately, the 9th level practitioners of key training have much better control over their bodies than ordinary people, so after a few breaths, Wei Fan adjusted his mentality and nodded and said, "Colonel Lin, I'm ready, no problem." Lin Ziming patted him on the shoulder, and then said to Director Feng and Huo Xiaoping, "Director Feng, Director Huo, in this case, let's go in now." Director Feng nodded, and walked forward with Huo Xiaoping, and performed fingerprint and iris recognition on the alloy door. After a moment, the alloy door slowly opened. And at the moment the door opened, there was a swish. More than 20,000 eyes were almost simultaneously cast towards the entrance. Stern and fierce. This was Wei Fan's first feeling. Is this the local soldier, just like the old ancestor? Then Director Feng walked in front and led a few people into the public training area. The area of this training area is about the size of 5 or 6 football fields. More than 24,000 soldiers are divided into more than 60 square formations according to the specifications of 20x20. These square formations all face the left side of the entrance to the training area, where there is a temporary platform. When Director Feng and his men came to the platform, a girl with short hair standing up quickly stepped forward and handed a microphone to Director Feng. "Director Feng, the audio has been debugged. You can start talking by pressing this key." Director Feng thanked her politely, then walked to the center of the platform and looked down. As the saying goes, 1,000 people are of all kinds, and 10,000 people are endless. Standing in front of more than 20,000 soldiers, even Director Feng was somewhat shocked. However, as a veteran member of the system who had seen big scenes, Director Feng adjusted his mood faster than Wei Fan. He took a deep breath and said slowly, "Comrades, hello. Let me introduce myself. My name is Feng Xiachen, from the National Major Technical Equipment Office. You can just call me Director Feng." Pa pa pa. Applause soon broke out from the audience. Director Feng quietly waited for the applause to die down, and continued, "Everyone should have received the transfer order from the original combat module to the Jumang base in the past 2 days. Before coming here, everyone signed the relevant regulations, and also knew that this was a major long-term secret mission that might last for several years. But no one knows the specific content of the mission yet, and I believe everyone is somewhat curious. Today, I have gathered everyone together, firstly to introduce the main management personnel of the base, and secondly to inform everyone of the details of this mission. But before that, please allow me to keep you in suspense and ask everyone a question first. Do you think there are extraordinary powers in this world? Not the kind of metaphysics of Xiao Jingtang and Wang Feng, but extraordinary powers that can fly into the sky and hide in the ground. You can communicate with your comrades and friends around you first, and there is no need to be too restrained. As soon as Director Feng finished speaking, a low and dense discussion sounded from the audience. After about a minute, Director Feng felt that the time was about right. Then he pressed his hands down and said, "Okay, now please raise your hands if you think there are supernatural powers in the world." In the meeting hall of more than 20,000 people, no one raised their hands. "Please raise your hands if you think there are no supernatural powers." Swish, almost all the soldiers raised their hands this time. Director Feng nodded and continued, "It seems that everyone thinks there are no supernatural powers in the world, which must be the view of most ordinary people. But today I want to tell you a piece of news. There are actually supernatural powers in this world, and we have mastered them, and we can use them in the army in a relatively wide and popular way." As soon as Director Feng said this, there was a short silence in the meeting hall, and then a more intense exchange of voices than before suddenly broke out. Some soldiers blinked their eyes, looking confused. Some soldiers dug their ears, thinking they had heard wrongly. There were even several military leaders who were originally of high rank and had good qualifications detected in this test, and they simply frowned. If it weren't for the special occasion, they might even directly scold Director Feng for talking nonsense. The situation at the venue is within Director Feng's expectations, or within the expectations of the core members. Director Feng smiled and said to Wei Fan, "Patriarch Wei, thank you for your help." Wei Fan nodded and strode to the front of the stage. Then he took out a Gatling gun from his space bag. Chapter 290 Official Opening of Local Practice. Just when Wei Fan took out the Gatling gun from his body, the whole venue suddenly fell into a strange silence, and everyone's eyes widened. Needless to say, the area of the public training area that can accommodate more than 20,000 people is as large as several 400-meter track and field stadiums. As we all know, a standard 400-meter track and field stadium with 8 runways has a total area of 14,619.9 square meters. From this, it can be easily estimated that the total area of this public training area is at least more than 70,000 square meters. With more than 3 square meters of space per person for more than 20,000 soldiers, there is no situation that some of the students who are not familiar with this school think that there is not enough space for 20,000 people. In addition, because the logistics staff set up a huge LCD screen before Director Feng and others arrived, even the soldiers in the last row could clearly see the scene happening on the high platform at this moment. A man in ancient costumes conjured up a Gatling gun out of thin air? Not to mention the problem of painting style. Just say that this behavior is magic? Or is it the extraordinary that Director Feng said? While the more than 20,000 soldiers were in great doubt, the expressions of Lin Ziming and Director Feng on the high platform were not much better. At this moment, Lin Ziming's eyes twitched, and he whispered to Wei Fan, "Patriarch Wei, you took the wrong thing. What we are going to perform is flying in the air, not holding weapons to fight the enemy. We need to use flying swords." Flying swords? Wei Fan was stunned for a few seconds, and then he reacted suddenly. He slapped his forehead in annoyance. "Oh, look at my memory. I forgot the process when I was nervous. I'm sorry, I'll change it back." Yes, that's right. The reason why Wei Fan took out the Gatling gun was not because he was going to show off his flying skills, but because he was too nervous and took the wrong thing. After all, as a descendant of a traverser born and raised in the Great Mo realm, Wei Fan really didn't experience such a big scene. In fact, he showed a little nervousness when he first entered the venue, but later he barely suppressed it by adjusting his breathing. But this suppression was only temporary. When he came to the high platform and saw the more than 20,000 soldiers below, the previous nervousness resurfaced. After all, no one has stipulated that practitioners cannot have social phobia, right? When many people were in school, they would be nervous to death when they went to the podium to read an essay in class. Practitioners are also human beings, and it is normal to have such emotions. So in a panic, Wei Fan subconsciously took out a Gatling gun. When people are nervous, they will subconsciously choose the things they trust most in their hands, such as pillows and kitchen knives. There also a news report last time that a girl in 1-1 subconsciously took out her gun when she encountered a street interview. So it was reasonable for Wei Fan to take out a Gatling gun. Although his current life weapon is still the big tripod. But in fact, the descendant of this time traveler is already planning to replace his life weapon with a Gatling gun. First, the Gatling gun is powerful, and second, the materials of the rabbits are of extremely high grade. Wei Fan once asked Tang Pin, who is in charge of weapons research, to do a comparative experiment. The results of the experiment were very surprising. The difference between the material of his big tripod and the alloy of the rabbits was exactly the difference between Ito Mima and Sun Yingsha. In fact, this is normal. Although the refined iron and refined copper of the Great Mo realm can be further optimized with the increase of spiritual energy and spiritual flame, the limitations of the material itself are there. For example, the hardness of the rabbit's tungsten steel alloy can be as high as 81 HRC, while Wei Fan's big tripod is only 35 HRC. It's not that there are no materials stronger than steel tungsten alloy in the Great Mo realm, but those materials are not accessible to Wei Fan at all. For example, the flying sword in the image of the nascent soul left by Wei Siming is definitely much stronger than steel tungsten alloy. But that is the magic weapon of the nascent soul sword cultivator. It can be said that all the wealth of a 4th level nascent soul cultivator has been invested. Any corner is not an expense that Wei Fan can afford. It can be said that in the realm below the nascent soul, the hardness of the rabbit's alloys is definitely better than that of the Great Mo realm cultivators. The main reason why Wei Fan can't change his life magic weapon for the time being is very simple: he still has no money. However, the lack of money here is different from the lack of money to buy the materials for the nascent soul. He mainly lacks the expenses for customizing the guns and the gunfire money for the bullets. After all, he bought the guns as a personal transaction and could not embezzle the spiritual stone dividends of the Wei family. A Gatling gun made of top alloys is really not cheap. From design to production, the actual cost is estimated to be 8 figures. Therefore, Wei Fan is currently in the stage of saving money, including this time to be an instructor in the local area, with a subsidy of 5,000 yuan a day. In addition to his dividends as the head of the Wei family, if nothing unexpected happens, a real Imperial Gatling monk will be seen in a while. The site returns to the venue. After discovering that it took the wrong thing, Wei Fan hurriedly began to look for the flying sword. However, as he turned over, fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. I don't know if you have ever had this experience. An item can be seen everywhere on weekdays, but when you need it, you don't know where it has gone. You can't find it even if you turn over the wall and cabinet, and you are almost demolishing the house. This is the situation Wei Fan is facing at this time. So, he gritted his teeth. He simply took out various items from the storage bag: 82-2 type grenades, 95 type automatic rifles, bulletproof vests, individual rocket launchers, and a tank operation manual. Although it takes a lot of spiritual energy to store and retrieve space bags on the mainland, Wei Fan can't care about it at this time. Anyway, the 9th level of key training can still afford this consumption. Finally, under Lin Ziming's twitching eyes, Wei Fan finally took out a flying sword. "Colonel Lin, I found it." Lin Ziming laughed dryly at this. Although he wanted to complain a few words, he thought that it was not appropriate in this occasion, so he said, "Patriarch Wei, in this case, let's demonstrate it as we said before. You should be steady and don't get into trouble again." Look at Lin Ziming, he even used honorifics to Wei Fan, who was only 10 years older than him. Hearing this, Wei Fan gave him a reliable smile. "Colonel Lin, don't worry." Then he directed his mind to the flying sword and performed the sword control technique. It was mentioned a long time ago. In most cases, if the practitioners in the Great Mo realm want to fly, they must refine their own magical instruments after reaching the 7th level of key training. Then they can fly their own magical instruments to the sky. Therefore, in the Great Mo realm, you can often see some practitioners flying with magical instruments such as guns, sticks, axes, and maces. Apart from this, the only exception is the flying boat. However, just like there are 5 of the 4 heavenly kings, there are naturally 2 exceptions. The second case is the flying sword. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291 Official Start of Local Cultivation. When many people first learn to swim, they often tie inflatable sleeves on their arms to help them master the swimming style. Before the practitioners in the Great Mo realm truly learn how to fly with their natal magic weapon, they also use an auxiliary magic weapon. It is the flying sword of the performance method. The word performance method means to demonstrate the magic. This flying sword is very cheap, and like the European sturgeon, it has a very short lifespan. Basically, it will be scrapped after flying in the air for a period of time, and it cannot be reused for a long time. The main purpose of the flying sword of the performance method is to facilitate the 7th level practitioners of key training to experience the feeling of flying with magic weapons, similar to the local simulated driving. The flying sword of the performance method is often equipped with a talisman similar to an airbag, which is extremely sensitive. Once the user encounters an accident, this talisman will be activated to achieve an emergency buffer effect. With the support of the talisman and the realm of the practitioner will basically not have any major problems. The flying effect is no different from the natal magic weapon, with high safety and fault tolerance, so the flying sword of the performance method is very popular among practitioners who have just entered the 7th level of key training. Just like you can't find a post-90s generation who hasn't eaten Little Raccoon crispy noodles and Mimi shrimp noodles in the local area, you can basically not find a practitioner who hasn't used the flying sword of performing arts in the Great Mo world. The demonstration instrument arranged by the rabbits this time is the flying sword of performing arts. As for why Wei Fan was not allowed to control his own instrument. Are you kidding? Are the viewing performances of the flying sword of performing arts the same? The concept of sword immortal is engraved in the deepest part of every Chinese heart. Facts have proved that this mark is also engraved in the hearts of the warriors at the venue, when Wei Fan flew in the air with his sword and flew 2 circles over the public practice room. More than 60 square formations almost simultaneously made various degrees of gasping sounds. The room temperature displayed in the temperature-controlled room actually increased by 0.2 degrees Celsius in an instant. Of course, some people still have doubts about Wei Fan's flying in the air. But no matter how much they think, they are far from being as confident as they were at the beginning. For example, when some people saw Wei Fan flying in the air, they unconsciously thought of using wire ropes. But as soon as this idea came up, they took the initiative to deny this idea in their hearts. Wei Fan's movements were much smoother than wire ropes, and it was completely unreasonable in logic. After all, this kind of lie could be exposed quickly, and there was no need to lie. Therefore, gradually, everyone felt a sense of expectation and excitement. Above the training area. After flying a few circles with his sword, Wei Fan followed the instructions of Lin Ziming in the earphone. He landed in a square array area near the center. There were warriors within 5 or 6 meters around. It must be said that the quality of the local warriors is really high. Even though everyone's eyes were full of strong shock and curiosity at this time, no one came forward to join in the fun without the leader in charge saying anything. At most, some warriors in non-central areas raised and twisted their necks a little more because they were far away from Wei Fan. Looking at this group of disciplined warriors, Wei Fan suddenly thought of his own defenders in Qi County. Although the Wei family followed the ancestral teachings left by Wei Ziming and cultivated a fairly good city defense army, and there was no large-scale collapse during the siege. But compared with these local warriors, the discipline of the Chixin city defenders is probably several levels worse. And discipline is often the foundation of a strong team. While sighing in his heart, Wei Fan did not stop his movements. He still stood still according to Lin Ziming's instructions, and his mind activated the flying sword of the performance and sent it to the warrior square on the left. It was quite a coincidence. The first in this warrior square was Hong Haiping from the class of Chen Rong, a single spiritual root warrior. Hong Haiping's age can be seen from his name, but unlike Chen Rong's father, his father was just an ordinary person who had been rescued. The 24-year-old Hong Haiping is now a second-term non-commissioned officer. In the previous qualification test, he was detected with 3 spiritual roots. He was also the only warrior in Chen Rong's class who was detected with spiritual roots, except Chen Rong. However, Hong Haiping did not know his qualifications at this time. He was slightly stunned when he saw the flying sword floating towards him. Then he quickly turned his head and looked at Guo Su, the instructor of this formation. Guosu gave him an encouraging look and nodded his chin towards the flying sword. Comrade Haping, if you are interested, you can touch it. This sword is not sharpened, so don't worry about getting scratched. After hearing the permission, Hong Haping no longer hesitated and gently grasped the hilt of the sword floating in front of him. The length of the flying sword is about 1.5 meters, but the weight is unexpectedly light, about 3 or 4 pounds at most. When he held the sword, Hong Haping suddenly thought of his childhood when he played the swordsman with a water pipe and a bed sheet. Of course. Also remembered was the mixed doubles of men and women from his own parents, which used bamboo sticks. In fact, Hong Haping has always had a question: why are parents all over the country so unified in using bamboo sticks? After getting the flying sword, Hong Haping waved it up and down with his other hand, and did not feel any trace of wire. In addition, Wei Fan had already been exposed to the guidance of divine thoughts, so Hong Haping could clearly feel the sense of falling caused by gravity. Then Hong Haping handed the sword to another warrior beside him and began to pass it around. Gradually, the square formation was filled with discussions. A few minutes later, Hong Haping suddenly heard Wei Fan's voice: "Little brother, do you want to experience the feeling of flying a sword?" Hong Haping was stunned when he heard this, and pointed at himself with his index finger. "Are you talking to me?" "Yes." Wei Fan nodded, used his divine mind to summon the flying sword, and said, "Stand behind me and hold my shoulders. I will take you up to fly a circle." Hearing this, Hong Haping suddenly felt a warm current rushing to his cheeks, and the whole person was a little dazed. Flying with a sword, this is the childhood dream of many Chinese people. Now he actually has the opportunity to experience it. Hong Haping hurriedly looked at Guosu again, and nodded quickly after getting the other party's permission. I do. Seeing this, Wei Fan smiled heartily and flashed to Hong Haping's side. He held the hilt of the sword with one hand and made a sword flower, and held Hong Haping with the other hand, invoking the spiritual energy spell. After a moment, the two flew into the air at the same time and came to the top more than 20 meters above the ground. Hong Haping pursed his lips tightly, and the chicken on his face was shaking uncontrollably. This kind of shaking was not fear, but excitement. Excited that he could fly in the air with a sword, and even more excited that he was about to come into contact with the extraordinary. He could clearly feel that the flying sword under his feet had no external assistance, it was purely flying in the air. At the same time, the soldiers on the ground also had different expressions. Some were amazed, some were discussing, and some were expecting. At this point, even those who had doubts before believed 90%. After all, the soldiers who were qualified to come here were all loyal children who absolutely trusted the organization. Those 500,000 and public intellectuals would never appear in the Jumang base. Therefore, their previous doubts about the situation described by Director Feng mainly came from concepts and inherent cognition, and did not carry any personal color, not the so-called arguing for the sake of arguing. Therefore, they would not mindlessly argue and make up for it, such as deliberately suspecting that Hong Haping was an actor, etc. Again, if all this is false, then this lie will soon be exposed by facts, and the acting that costs a lot of money will be meaningless. 10 minutes later, Wei Fan landed on the ground with Hong Haping. Seeing that the soldiers' mood had obviously changed, Director Feng on the high platform continued to speak. "Comrades, Instructor Wei has demonstrated the application of extraordinary power. If you still have doubts, it doesn't matter. We are about to enter the next stage, which is to let everyone present start to practice. As long as everyone practices hard, you will soon be able to fly in the air. In addition, I will mention it again here, what we are doing is practice, a kind of climbing and moving in a field. It is not cultivating immortals, let alone cultivating gods. Cultivation is not that mysterious. Our comrades at the forefront have analyzed a very correct path, and new results are constantly emerging. In addition, please note that the instructors of each square will issue a pill called Keeling Dan to everyone. This is a standard pill produced by our Harbin Pharmaceutical Factory No. 6, which is related to a stage called Keeling. Along with the pill, we also issued the 3 days to Keeling and 5 days to practice key manual compiled by us. Next, please invite Instructor Wei to come forward and let him introduce the basic concepts of practice to everyone. It has been recommended by the Big Book, and there will be a chapter of the recommendation later. Chapter 292, Ancient Cultivation Mystery. The full cultivation of the Jumang base is the first step in the rabbit's local cultivation plan, and it is also an important link that cannot be missed. Therefore, starting more than 2 months ago, The core layer has invested a lot of energy in this project. In addition to millions of cubic meters of spiritual energy and base vacancy, the Jumang base also reserves a large number of various elixirs. Among them, the number of Keeling Dan is as high as 150,000, which is theoretically enough for each soldier to conduct 6 rounds of Keeling attempts. The remaining resources such as Kingain Dan and Huti Dan are also not small. It is not an exaggeration to say that the cheapest Kingain Dan can be eaten as candy beans, and 2 pills can be stuffed into the mouth whenever there is nothing to do. In this abundant resource environment, the warriors' Keeling process went smoothly. The warriors with good luck succeeded in 1 shot, the ordinary ones succeeded in 2 or 3 times, and a few non-Africans succeeded in only 4 or 5 times. Of course, there are also some very special ones. For example, a warrior named Yu Jianhui spent a full 14 Keeling Dan before he succeeded. However, such super non-Africans are a minority after all, and most warriors are still ordinary people. For example, Hong Haiping. He successfully drew Qi into his body when he took the Qi awakening pill for the 3rd time, and took the first step of cultivation. At this time, Hong Haiping, who had successfully awakened his spirit, was looking at his abdomen with curiosity. At the same time, he nudged his comrade Yun Lixin with his elbow and said, "Oh my god, there seems to be something in my abdomen, just like a warm baby." Yun Lixin was Hong Haiping's fellow villager in Yeziao. He succeeded in awakening his spirit 1 round earlier than Hong Haiping. Seeing this, he immediately rolled his eyes. "Look at your cowardly look, like a kid in the village. How can what the organization said not be true?" Facing the ridicule of his comrades, Hong Haiping scratched his head without caring at all, and a simple smile appeared on his face. "I didn't say I didn't believe it. Comrade Wei just now, no, it should be Instructor Wei, who took me to the sky for a flight." He and Yun Lixin were childhood friends and had a very good relationship. However, when they joined the army, they were divided into 2 units and had few opportunities to meet each other. Now, both of them happened to have detected their spiritual root qualifications and were transferred to the Jumang base at the same time. In addition, the General Affairs Department used the place of origin as the main factor when dividing the square formation, so the 2 friends met again after many years of separation. Then Hong Haiping looked up at the ceiling, facing the air with both hands, and gently closed them like catching fireflies when he was a child. Yun Lixin looked at his operation with a bewildered look on his face. "What are you doing?" Hong Haiping moved his clasped palms in front of him, looked at the colorless air and said, "Didn't Instructor Wei just say that we are surrounded by L17 spirits? Aura, which is very precious. I heard that long-term inhalation of aura can prolong life and so on. It would be great if my parents were here. Hey, dog, do you think that the ancient gods like Erlang Shen and Zhang Guolio also relied on aura to obtain the Tao?" Hearing this, Yun Lixin couldn't help but frowned and corrected, "Didn't Director Feng say that we are practicing, not cultivating immortals? Immortals and gods are all fake, you can't believe them, understand?" Hong Haiping shook his head, obviously having his own opinion. "It's because I don't believe in immortals and gods that I say they have achieved those achievements with aura. Look at Instructor Wei, his flying and hiding appearance. If it were in ancient times, do you think he would be regarded as a god and worshipped?" That may not be the case. While Yun Lixin and Hong Haiping were discussing the origins of ancient immortals, Director Feng and Lin Ziming were discussing similar issues on a high platform hundreds of meters away. However, compared to Yun Lixin and Hong Haiping's half-understanding of cultivation, Lin Ziming and the others had much more extensive and clear information. For example, they knew that spiritual energy was not a substance currently available on Earth, but was slowly transported back from the Great Mo realm. Another example is something else that the core layer is planning. At this time, Lin Ziming had just finished instructing a nearby phalanx warrior to awaken his spirit. After returning to the high platform, he found Director Feng and asked, "Director Feng, how is the situation in the special phalanx?" Upon hearing this, Director Feng raised a report in his hand and said with a smile, "Colonel Lin, you came at a good time. Supervisor Huo just handed me the statistical results. The result is very simple. Taoist Chen and others in the special phalanx have all successfully awakened their spirits. However, there is a data that I think is worth paying attention to. That is, their awakening efficiency is much higher than that of ordinary warrior phalanxes, and the average consumption of awakening pills per person is only 1.5556. Lin Ziming took the table and looked at it for a few times, and soon fell into deep thought. The so-called special phalanx is a comparative awakening group specially approved by the core layer. There are a total of 36 members in this group. At the same time, their identities are not active soldiers, but pure cultivators from various famous mountains and rivers. For example, Wudang, Qingcheng, Songshan, Taoist ancestral home, etc. The reason why the core organization set up a control group is very simple, and in a sense it is similar to Hong Haiping's guess. It is hoped that through spiritual awakening and practice, some truths of ancient Chinese mythology can be restored and cracked, and whether there are traces of practice in ancient times. China has a long history of thousands of years, and while the flame of humanity has never been extinguished, legends of immortals and gods have also occupied a large part of the history of all dynasties. From the earliest Pangu opening the sky to Nuwa creating humans, to Hawaii shooting the sun, longbow fishing for the turtle, the 8 immortals crossing the sea, and so on. Ancient myths are innumerable and infinite. Even on an ordinary hill, sometimes you can see a small land temple. To put it nicely, it is called a regional legend, and to put it bluntly, it is a wild god. The general view of ancient myths and legends is that they are a kind of totem conceived by ancient ancestors in their ignorant period, and most of the time they are the brain supplements of natural phenomena. For example, we now know that when cold convection and warm convection intersect, frontal rain will fall and layered clouds will appear at the same time. However, the ancient ancestors did not understand these principles, and misunderstood the celestial phenomena when the two convections met as the Dragon King flying in the sky and making clouds and rain. For example, the ghost fire that is not well known to even students is actually phosphorus burning in the air. But on the other hand, some myths and legends are still in doubt. For example, the ancient innocence theory in Huangdi Nijing Su 1 records. I asked the Heavenly Master, I heard that the ancient people lived to be 100 years old, and their movements were not declining. People nowadays are half 100 years old and their movements are declining. Is it because of the difference in the times? Will people lose it? This part of the content was quite controversial before the discovery of spiritual energy. Some people think that the record in Su 1 is false, and some people are skeptical about it. But now with the development of the Great Mo realm, this part of the content has become a little subtle. It is impossible for people who know the inside story to see this passage without some thoughts in their hearts. In addition, there are many classics of cultivation in China that are also quite mysterious, which belongs to the kind of situation that you have no real hammer to deny or confirm. In the mouths of non-believers, this is nonsense, but in the hearts of believers, it is the true Taoist scriptures. Before, the rabbits had studied those inherited Taoist scriptures, but to no avail. For example, as mentioned before, the rabbits once discovered an ancient pre-Qin book written in small seal script, but the content was denied by the old patriarch Wei. But this does not mean that the locals had no contact with cultivation before. Maybe there is some unknown inheritance left in those famous mountains and rivers? I will stay up all night today, so the update time may be late. It is said that my dad and I will take turns to accompany him, but my dad is over 60 years old, so I try to accompany him myself. The mental pressure is indeed a bit high, but not so tight. It's just that my biological clock is messed up. I can still guarantee daily updates if I accompany him at night and sleep during the day. 2 updates will be 5,000-5,500, which is half more than 2K members. Chapter 293 Ancient Cultivation Mystery. Almost all of China's famous mountains and rivers have mythical colors. For example, there's Zhangzhenren in Wudang. It is said that Zhang Sanfeng lived for more than 200 years. Some legends even say that he simply ascended to heaven. In fact, if this legend is spread among the people, it would be fine. The key is that there is a very bizarre official evidence. During the 276 years of the Ming dynasty, all emperors except Chongzhen searched for Zhang Sanfeng, and the whole process lasted for more than 200 years. Among them, Zhu Di, the emperor of the Ming dynasty, worshipped Zhang Sanfeng the most. He searched for Zhang Sanfeng hard but found no news, so he simply mobilized 300,000 migrant workers to build the Wudang Mountain Palace. The palace is huge and took 7 years to complete. After the completion, a statue of Zhang Sanfeng was built in the sea of the palace for worship, and he was called Yaolong Liuzu Yingxin Yuhuaxuwa Ipudu Xianzhen. If you say that the first few emperors looked for him, it would be fine, because they did not care about the people but the personal desire of ghosts and gods. But Zhu Yaodang and even Zhu Changluo did the same thing 170 or 80 years later, which is very strange. Besides Mount Wudang, There is a flying fairy sword in Qingcheng, and Mount Long, who is the ancestral home of the Shanghai school of Taoism. Zhang Daoling is an immortal. How does the saying go? Immortals belong to immortals, and people belong to the mortal world. As for Mount Song, it is even more so. It is a sacred place of Buddhism and has countless eminent monks throughout the ages. In addition to various folk myths passed down orally, many ancient mysterious events are also recorded in the official history of China. For example, the Book of the Later Han Dynasty, biographies of Feng Shui recorded the miraculousness of Zhuo Si, which was described like Iron Man. The history of Song Dynasty simply wrote an independent biography of Chen Tuan for Chen Tuan, and the content is somewhat similar to Su Wen, over 100 years old and childlike. As for Lu Dongbin, let's not discuss it. Although Lu Zixing, a Taoist priest in the Ming Dynasty, claimed to have seen Lu Dongbin, who was more than 500 years old, there was no actual evidence for this. If nothing unexpected happens, it is likely that he was flattering himself. In addition to the above examples, the most solid official history of immortals actually comes from Zhu Yuanzhang, because this is the record he wrote personally. Zhu Yuanzhang ordered his subordinates to burn Zhou Dian twice, but he didn't die. He was locked up for a month without food, but he didn't die. He was drowned, but he didn't die. Finally, he had to give in and wrote a biography of Zhou Dian the immortal himself. This thing is different from the situation that some people think was added later in the Tui Bei Tu. At present, everyone recognizes that it was written by Zhu Yuanzhang himself. However, there is a view in the literary and historical circles that Zhu Yuanzhang actually made up this book, and the inside story involves the son of Hu Chongfei in the harem, that is, Zhu Zhen, the king of Chuzhou. For example, a very famous professor surnamed Liu from Nankai University once raised such a question: if Zhou Dian is really an immortal, why didn't Zhu Yuanzhang find his entire chin? But no matter what, the concept of immortals has never been cut off in the cultural heritage of China. And it is indeed an unshakable fact. You can find them in folk legends, unofficial history, and official history. Of course, no matter how far-fetched and terrifying these legends are, we should always maintain a dialectical attitude towards them. From the perspective of breaking feudal superstition, those meaningless tricks must be abandoned. For example, the rumors of hairy water monsters around 1950 almost caused the society to collapse. Production was forced to stagnate, and all kinds of people with ulterior motives took the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. Therefore, this kind of useless feudal superstition must be broken, otherwise it is easy to cause turmoil. But on the other hand, after the discovery of the Great Mo realm, some ancient legends that are relatively not illusory or have little impact on the stability of today's society have possible research value in some aspects. Although many famous mountains and rivers have gradually become commercialized, the local kind of pure cultivation has gradually begun to change. There are very few people who really meet the conditions. But no matter how few such people are, they still exist. Under the mobilization of national power, Huo Xiaoping found this group of suitable candidates without much effort. At this moment, the members of this special square formation were taken to another small laboratory, and the staff took samples and tested them. This was the process they had been informed of before coming, so the 36 outsiders did not show any resistance, but cooperated with the process. Considering that the awakening phase has been completed, the subsequent 3 days of awakening the spirit and 5 days of inducing key exercises have also been distributed to the soldiers. Therefore, Director Feng, Lin Ziming, and Wei Fan followed everyone to the laboratory, and the venue was handed over to Huo Xiaoping. Since the test takes time, Director Feng took this opportunity to supplement other information to Wei Fan and the others. Among these 36 outsiders, the oldest is 67 years old, the youngest is 16 years old, and the average age is 32.3 years old. It is worth mentioning that the oldest and youngest Taoist priests are grandfather and grandson. Lin Ziming blinked and asked curiously, "Grandfather and grandson? Don't outsiders not marry after becoming monks?" Director Feng smiled and shook his head, saying, "Colonel Lin, you are typical of being misled by some news. Taoist priests can actually marry, otherwise how do you think Zhang Wuji came from? His father is a Taoist priest in Wudang, and so are Song Qingshu and his son." Lin Ziming blinked and thought about it. "Hey, it's true." While the few people were talking, Bian Wenai, the leader of the life science laboratory of the Jumang base, who was responsible for analyzing the sampling, walked over quickly. Bian Wenai is a new expert in the field of life sciences, in his early 40s this year. He is not as academically advanced as Lin Li, nor is he an academician-level scholar, but his ability should not be underestimated. If he is given another 10 or 15 years, he will almost certainly grow into a new giant. In fact, it is easy to understand if you think about it. Lin Ziming noticed that at this moment, Bian Wenai's face was slightly puzzled, with his brows slightly furrowed. After walking in front of them, he handed over a report. Director Feng, Colonel Lin, and Instructor Wei, according to our tests. Some of these outsiders seem to have an abnormal affinity for spiritual energy. Seeing that they were a little confused, Bian Wenai took a deep breath and continued, take Taoist Wang from Qingchang Mountain as an example. Taoist Wang is 45 years old this year, has no family, and is a true pure cultivator. According to our tests, the speed at which ordinary 4 spiritual root practitioners absorb spiritual particles is about 0.000269 cubic meters per minute. In addition, due to the relationship between the ratio of spiritual root attributes and attention, there may be a certain error between different personnel. But in extreme cases, the range is only about plus or minus 10%. However, it is strange that Taoist Wang's absorption rate per minute has reached 0.00034442 cubic meters, which is comparable to some 3 spiritual roots with poor attribute ratios. Chapter 294 set off to Qingchang Mountain. What? Taoist Wang's absorption speed of spiritual particles is 30% higher than that of ordinary 4 spiritual roots. Hearing the results of Bian Wenai's report, Lin Ziming's pupils shrank and he asked quickly, Researcher Bian, have you found the reason for this abnormal rate? Bian Wenai shook his head in distress and said, Sorry, our equipment did not detect any useful information, so I would like to ask Instructor Wei to go over and try. Hearing this, Lin Ziming immediately said to Wei Fan, Instructor Wei, please. Wei Fan nodded, and then entered the laboratory under the guidance of Bian Wenai. Among the more than 30 outsiders, he found a middle-aged man in his 40s. This man had an ordinary face, a hairpin in his bun, and looked short and thin. But his mental outlook was very good, and he looked full of energy and blood, as if he could kill 3 programmers with one punch. Bian Wenai took the Taoist priest aside and introduced him to Wei Fan, Instructor Wei, this is Taoist Wang Dongsu. Then he said to Taoist Wang, I don't need to introduce this person anymore, right? Taoist Wang nodded and made a Taoist etiquette seal to Wei Fan, hello, Instructor Wei. Wei Fan returned the greeting and then put his hand on Taoist Wang. Taoist Wang knew before that Wei Fan would examine him, so his expression was very calm and he didn't show any resistance. After a while, Wei Fan opened his eyes, frowned, and looked a little puzzled. Strange, too strange. Taoist Wang's meridians are obviously the same width as ordinary people, but the amount of spiritual energy passing through is much larger, as if they are elastic. Then he hesitated for a moment and added, although I don't know the reason, this doesn't seem to be a natural physique. Lin Ziming, who was standing aside, heard this and his breathing suddenly stagnated slightly. He knew Wei Fan's character very well. If he was not very sure, he would not have said this. He thought for a moment and asked Taoist Wang, do you usually practice any classics? Taoist Wang replied, I only practiced a sword technique and a breathing technique. These 2 techniques were taken away by a group of officials with an order 3 months ago. 3 months ago was October. I roughly know what time period it was. Lin Ziming calculated the time. 3 months ago, there was indeed a round of technique collection in the local area. The small seal technique of the pre-Qin Kigan practitioners was the result of that time. However, all the techniques found at that time were proven to be incompatible with spiritual energy. Then he continued to ask, Master Wang, apart from the exercises, is there anything else you do when you practice that is different from ordinary people? Master Wang thought for a few seconds, and suddenly thought of something. If I had to say what is different from ordinary people, there is one thing. I usually like to practice on the cliff behind the Taoist palace. Are you alone usually? Wang Dongsu shook his head. Not only that, my 2 disciples also meditate with me. They are King Feng and King Gayu here. King Feng and King Gayu. Lin Ziming searched for these 2 Taoist names on the form, and then his pupils suddenly contracted. I saw that Master Wang and his 2 disciples were among the people who absorbed the fastest among the crowd. Lin Ziming circled the names of the 3 Taoist priests Wang and asked, then Taoist priest Wang, do you feel any special sensations when you meditate on the cliff? Taoist priest Wang nodded uncertainly. It seems that it does. Usually, as long as we practice near the cliff, our breath will be much smoother. Lin Ziming noticed that Taoist priest Wang was talking about breath, not true qi. Friends who know something about Taoism should know that. The practice of local Taoism emphasizes the practice of true qi, but from the current scientific perspective, true qi is actually a concept without any evidence. Believers think it exists and argue for it. Disbelievers think it does not exist and sneer at it. Therefore, in this case, true qi is not suitable for use as an example. But breath is different. The concept of breath can be found everywhere in life. For example, when your nose is blocked, it is difficult to breathe. This is breath stagnation. When your nose is clear, the breath will naturally become smooth. Also, when you are nervous, taking a few more breaths can help adjust your mood. Breathing is widely used in sports and singing, and the same is true for local monasticism. When visiting outsiders before, officials had found an old Taoist priest in his 70s in Tongnan Mountain, who was vigorous and had bright eyes. And the amazing thing is that this old Taoist priest only breathes 4 or 5 times a minute, which is only 1/5 of the average person. So for what Taoist Wang said about the smooth breathing, in theory, there is a relatively high possibility that it is not a fantasy. This also shows that Taoist Wang is indeed a very pure folk practitioner as introduced before, and not a person who pretends to be a ghost. The cliff in the back mountain, Lin Ziming and Director Feng looked at each other, and saw strong curiosity in each other's eyes. The abnormal absorption rate of Taoist Wang and the other two has exceeded the limit that can be explained by the word coincidence, so after a little thought, Lin Ziming decisively said, Director Feng, please report to the organization. We are ready to set off for Qingchang Mountain. Director Feng had the same idea, so he immediately replied, no problem, I'll contact them now. After Director Feng left, Lin Ziming said to Taoist Wang, I'm afraid I'll trouble you to go to Qingchang Mountain with us again. Taoist Wang smiled and waved his hand, not caring. No problem, the country has allowed us outsiders to get in touch with the long-awaited path of cultivation. We are grateful enough. So why should we mention the trivial matter of leading the way? After saying this, Taoist Wang didn't know what he was thinking of, and a trace of regret suddenly appeared on his face. What a pity, the old master didn't have the chance to see this scene. Lin Ziming looked at him curiously and asked, I don't know who the elder master is. Taoist Wang sighed. My predecessor, Taoist Master Zhang Zhishan, passed away in 2015. Lin Ziming stood in awe. So I am Taoist Master Zhang's disciple. If there is anyone who best fits the modern people's imagination of practitioners in the past 20 years, it must be Taoist Master Zhang Zhishan. He is still climbing mountains and crossing ridges at the age of more than 90, and his body is strong, his eyes are sharp, and his spirit is vigorous. At the age of 93, he can still do more than 20 pull-ups. Let alone an immortal, he is undoubtedly worthy of being called a hermit master. After comforting Taoist Master Wang, Lin Ziming glanced at the others not far away with his peripheral vision. Just as Taoist Master Wang said. At this moment, most of the outsiders either took the time to meditate, or sat together in groups of 3 or 2, and were enthusiastically discussing Taoism. There were even a few older Taoists, and there were clear tears on their faces at this time. After all, for them, the practice system of the Great Mo realm is too consistent with what the practitioners have learned. Hearing the Tao in the morning, I can die in the evening. In addition, this group of people were originally selected by the organization with great effort, so it is not difficult to manage them. Just as Lin Ziming retracted his gaze, Director Feng, who went to report the news, came over. Colonel Lin, the Corps layer has approved the application to go to Qingchang Mountain. The route will take about 40 minutes to arrange, and the task of clearing the field at Qingchang Mountain has also begun. I am also responsible for the affairs of the Jumang base, so I will not accompany you this time. After the plane lands, someone else will contact you, and they are also very reliable comrades. The distance between the Jumang base and Qingchang Mountain is very close, so it is not too troublesome to arrange the route. As for the clearing of Qingchang Mountain, it is even simpler. Now it is only January of the new year, and there are not many tourists in Qingchang Mountain. In addition, the back mountain of the Taoist palace that Lin Ziming and others are going to, only needs to close the mountain gate. An hour later, everything is ready. Lin Ziming, Wei Fan, Taoist Wang and others parted with Director Feng and officially set off from the base. Target, Qingchang Mountain. Chapter 295, a shocking discovery. Qingchang Mountain. One of the 4 famous Taoist mountains in China. The original ancient name of Qingchang Mountain was Xiankang Mountain. According to legend, Emperor Huangdi traveled through the 5 sacred mountains. Ningfengzi, who lived in this mountain to practice Taoism, taught Huangdi the dragon climbing technique of controlling wind and clouds. Huangdi therefore built an altar to worship him as the 5 sacred mountains' grandfather, so later generations also called it Grandfather Mountain. It was not until the 18th year of Kayun in the Tang dynasty, that is, in 730 AD, that the name Qingchang Mountain began to be used. It is rumored that Qingchang Mountain is located between the Yin and Yang realms, and is connected to the netherworld. Evil ghosts from the netherworld often come out from here to cause trouble to the world. It is really a living hell. Later, Taoist masters preached here and used immortals to suppress the netherworld. Later, the dragon energy of the Yangtze River was gathered to destroy the Ghost King, and then peace was restored. It is said that Zhang Daoling, the Taoist heavenly master, showed his Taoism in Qingchang Mountain in his later years and passed away here. Since then, Qingchang Mountain has become the ancestral mountain of Xianxi Dao, and all generations of Xianxi from all over the country have come to Qingchang Mountain to worship the ancestral temple. I don't know if the rumor is true or not, but friends who have been to Qingchang Mountain should have an experience. Qingchang Mountain is really quite weird. Qingchang Mountain is surrounded by undulating peaks. It sounds nice to say that the forests are lush and green, and the paths are winding. To put it bluntly, there are 2 words, gloomy. Basically, you will be inexplicably startled after walking a few steps, but you will find nothing when you turn back. The above content comes from the personal experience of a novice fisherman who does not want to be named. In addition, there is another very strange thing in Qingchang Mountain. That is, although Qingchang Mountain is the ancestral home of Taoism, there are a bunch of Buddha statues in its back mountain, and their heads and hands are broken. Under normal circumstances, these Buddha statues should have been thrown away when Taoism flourished. How could they be preserved until now? The so-called respect for differences is an excuse, and the person who said this probably doesn't believe it himself. The dispute over the orthodoxy of Taoism has always been a matter of life and death. When one side has the upper hand, it basically wants to scatter the ashes of the other side. Not to mention in the ancestral home of Taoism. It's like there's a person living in your bedroom closet all year round. Don't you feel uncomfortable? This is indeed a very bizarre thing. However, not many people know this kind of anecdote. Most of the contemporary people's knowledge of Qingchang Mountain comes from Mr. Jin Yuang, a master of martial arts novels. The novel Swordsman made many people know Qingchang Mountain. Although the Qingchang sect in the novel represents the villain, it really made the Qingchang sect well known. In addition, Qingchang Mountain is also the place where Bai Suzhan became a Taoist. At the beginning, this girl set out from Qingchang Mountain to Yuhang. Bai Suzhan is in Qingchang Mountain, Suxian is in Yuhang, and Fahe is in Zhenjiang. It would be strange if this long-distance love triangle is not lively. However, these illusions happened thousands of years ago, and the wind and shadow disappeared in the years. Therefore, when Lin Ziming and others arrived at Qingchang Mountain, the only scene they could see was the boundless mountains and forests covered with heavy snow. Perhaps there are 1 or 2 ancient trees among them, which are the witnesses of those ancient legends. The main Taoist temples in Qingchang Mountain include Jianfu Palace, Taking Palace, Shanking Palace, Zhangren Temple, Laojian Pavilion, Yuking Palace, Patriarch Hall, Yuanming Palace, and Xianxi Cave. I am the abbot of Zhangren Temple. At the mountain gate in front of Qingchang Mountain, Taoist Wang was introducing the situation of the Taoist temple to everyone. He pointed to a direction and said as he walked, Zhangren Temple is located on the north slope of Zhangren Peak in Qingchang Mountain. The hall enshrines Luzhu and Chuzhu. The middle hall enshrines Ningfeng's Henren and Yao Wang's son's Henren. Lin Ziming walked side by side with Taoist Wang. Upon hearing this, he asked curiously, Luzhu must be Lu Dongbin, and Yao Wang's son's Henren must be Sun Samio, right? As for Chuzhu and Ningfeng's Henren, I really don't know. Taoist Wang smiled and said, Colonel Lin must have heard of Chuzhu's name. He is the famous Chu Chuji, one of the 7 true men of the north in Quanzhan Taoism. However, his image in history is much better than that in novels and storybooks. As for Ningfeng's Henren, people who have not been exposed to Taoist culture may not really know it. His name is Ningfengzi, also known as Long Qiao's Henren, an ancient immortal. According to the biographies of immortals, he was the Taozheng of Emperor Huangdi, and his background is quite great. Qingcheng Mountain was first famous because of him. Lin Ziming nodded in understanding. So that's how it is. Then the few of them walked for about half an hour, passing through the mountain gate and the Taoist palace. Finally, they arrived at the back mountain of Zhangren Peak. As soon as they entered the back mountain, Wei Fan couldn't help rubbing his hands. Hiss, it seems a bit cold. Lin Ziming also breathed out. In order to save spiritual energy, the two of them did not practice the exercises, so their senses were no different from ordinary people. In addition, the temperature in the Great Mo realm is fixed at the early 20s all year round, so when they suddenly came to the back mountain, their bodies did have some reactions. Although they were not as weak as if they had caught a cold, they were still somewhat uncomfortable. Taoist Wang was more used to this. He led the way while explaining, it is said that Qingcheng Mountain is connected to the netherworld, so the back mountain is always gloomy, and some people even call it a half-ghost cave. However, from a scientific point of view, this is because the mountain is in the shade, and Zhangren Peak is a semi-enclosed valley with a gap on the surface. The cold air pouring downhill easily forms valley wind, so it feels relatively cold. Lin Ziming looked at Taoist Wang, who talked about geographical knowledge with a strange expression, and felt that he should have a common language with Taoist Chen from Wudang, who always said believe in science. Then the few people walked while talking, and finally came to the edge of a cliff. The area of this cliff is about 100 square meters, and the height is about 1,000. The view of the cliff is extremely wide, and everything inside is a vast expanse of white, which makes people think of the magnificent words thousands of miles of ice, thousands of miles of snow. Looking inside and outside the Great Wall, there is only vastness. And it's a coincidence. The last sentence of this poem is quite suitable for the current situation in a sense. The sight returned to the original place. On the left side of the cliff, there was a huge stone about 7 or 8 meters high. There was no inscription. At this time, about half of the body was covered by heavy snow, and it was brown and white. Then Taoist Wang took a few people to the side of the huge stone, pointed to a few meditation cushions nearby and said, Colonel Lin, Instructor Wei, this is where the three of us, the master and the apprentice, will meditate. Lin Ziming looked at Wei Fan after hearing this. Instructor Wei, it seems that I have to trouble you. Wei Fan nodded, then walked to the side of the stone and used his divine consciousness. At the beginning, Wei Fan's expression was relatively relaxed and his expression was relatively calm. But as time went on, Wei Fan's brows gradually began to shrink, and finally twisted into a ball. Seeing this, Lin Ziming hurriedly asked everyone to step back a few steps. Wei Fan's perception ability is much stronger than that of ordinary practitioners of the same level. His expression is probably because he has made some special discovery. Sure enough. 10 minutes later, Wei Fan opened his eyes with a serious expression and said to Lin Ziming, Colonel Lin, although I can't find the source, I can feel the spiritual energy. I tried downloading the game that I saw in the video ad. It's so boring. In addition, if nothing unexpected happens, the old man will be discharged from the hospital in a few days. When that time comes, I will resume updating and try to pay back what I owe to the leader. Chapter 296, Sealing the Mountain. What? Spiritual energy? Hearing what Wei Fan said, Lin Ziming was startled. He glanced at Taoist Wang with a corner of his eye, and then asked, Wei Clan. Instructor Wei, are you sure you feel the spiritual energy? Wei Fan nodded affirmatively and said, 100% sure, Colonel Lin. You should know that I have a sharp innate spiritual sense, and I am much better than ordinary practitioners in terms of perception. Hearing this, Lin Ziming couldn't help but straighten his index finger, put his thumb up, and put his chin on a pistol-like gesture. The whole person fell into deep thought. Due to the presence of Taoist Wang, he and Wei Fan couldn't say many things openly. But both sides knew very well what the discovery of spiritual energy on the cliff meant. You know, according to the previous detection of the rabbits, there is definitely no spiritual energy in the local area now. In order to ensure the accuracy of this result, the core layer collected air samples in almost every area of the country. Noisy cities, secluded mountains, vast uninhabited areas. But who would have thought that spiritual energy would be found in Qingcheng Mountain? Thinking of this, Lin Ziming suddenly felt that something was wrong. It's strange. When the organization was drawing on the skills, they should have collected air samples in Qingcheng Mountain. If there was spiritual energy in Qingcheng Mountain, how could we not detect it at the time? Then he thought of something and asked Zhao Zhaiming, the staff member who is responsible for receiving them, "Zhao Zhao, which area of air did you collect in Qingchang Mountain?" Zhao Zhaiming recalled and pointed to the direction of the mountain gate and said, "It was Yuking Palace, Zushi Hall and the entrance of the mountain gate. Didn't you collect it here at Zhangren Peak?" Zhao Zhaiming shook his head. "No, there are only 3 sampling points in Qingchang Mountain, so this side of the cliff was not collected." Lin Zhaiming nodded thoughtfully. He did not blame Zhao Zhaiming and others for being too lazy. You should know that the sampling task involves all parts of the country. It is already a very, very detailed level to be able to collect samples in Qingchang Mountain. It is not realistic to require specific areas. There is no problem in theory to collect samples in the front, middle and back areas. After all, no one knows that there is spiritual energy in this cliff. From the outside, it is just an ordinary place for practicing Taoism. Then Lin Zhaiming said to Wei Fan, "Patriarch Wei, can you sense where the spiritual energy comes from?" Wei Fan shook his head solemnly. "The specific location is still uncertain, but it seems to be confined to the vicinity of the cliff. On the way here, we passed the mountain gate and the ancestral temple, and I didn't find any signs of spiritual energy, not even the Zhangren temple on the edge of the cliff." Hearing this, Lin Zhaiming's brows, which were already twisted, became even more furrowed. At this moment, Taoist Wang on the side suddenly thought of something and added, "Colonel Lin, there is another small situation when I meditate on weekdays. I don't know if I should talk about it." Lin Zhaiming raised his head, looked at him and said, "Master, please tell me." Taoist Wang stroked his beard and said, "According to my personal experience, the effect of meditating in the early morning seems to be better than other time periods. Now it seems that the concentration of spiritual energy in the early morning is slightly higher. Of course, this is just a feeling without evidence, and it is not ruled out that it is a psychological effect of this Taoist." Hearing this, Lin Zhaiming subconsciously glanced at his watch. It was 4:37 in the afternoon. Then he looked around. Thinking that it would be difficult for him and Wei Fan to find anything in the current situation, he finally said, "In this case, let's stay in Qingchang Mountain for one night. By the way, Taoist Wang, there is no need to arrange a place to stay. We can just set up a tent here on the cliff. In addition, Zhao Zhao, please report the situation here and see if the think tank has any better ideas." Zhao Zhaiming nodded after hearing this. "No problem, I'll do it now." Although Qingchang Mountain is a secluded place for cultivation, the network base station is extremely developed now, and it is also very easy to contact the outside world. For example, Taoist Wang's previous geographical knowledge of Shangu Feng was learned on the internet. The so-called cultivation does not mean being completely isolated from the outside world. It means being devoted to Taoism and not pursuing fame and fortune in contact with the secular world. Therefore, more than 10 minutes later, the core layer sent a reply, "The relevant materials for camping will be delivered soon, and a batch of testing equipment and personnel will arrive at the scene in about 8 to 10 hours. At the same time, starting tomorrow, Qingchang Mountain will be completely closed on the grounds of holding a Taoist ceremony, and tourists are not allowed to visit." Hearing that foreign aid was coming, Lin Zhaiming put his worries aside, but also had a little more expectation. Closing the mountain is actually very common during the off-season. After all, not all Taoist sects are completely obsessed with money. It is normal for some mountain gates to be closed 9 or 10 times a year. For example, in 2017 and 2018, Qingchang Mountain was closed 3 and 4 times. Well, it's just a pure mountain closure, not a discovery. After the instructions came from the core layer, everyone began to prepare for camping and closing the mountain. Wei Fan volunteered to hunt rabbits, and Zhao Zhaiming went to hand over the mountain closure matters to the relevant personnel. Lin Zhaiming followed Taoist Wang back to the book room of Zhangren Temple to see if there was any other information to learn. The book room of Zhangren Temple is not large, and it is about the size of a row of municipal libraries. Inside the book room, Taoist Wang picked up a book and introduced it to Lin Zhaiming. "Colonel Lin, all the books in the temple are here, a total of 200 or 300 books. About half of them are Taoist books compiled and printed within 20 years, and there are only about 10 books that truly record ancient legends. When the front mountain of Qingchang Mountain was built as a tourist attraction, people from the Cultural Relics Bureau came to inspect it. According to them, the oldest book in history is the Qian Bensu in my hand. The original name of Qingchang Mountain was Qiankang Mountain, and it was changed to Qingchang more than 1,300 years ago. The name of Shanghai can also explain the time when it was built and written. Of course, it has been collected by the Fu Museum, and the one in my hand is also a rubbing. Lin Ziming took over this ancient-style thread-bound book, flipped through it casually, and then asked, Taoist Wang, does this Qian Bensa record any secrets of Qingchang Mountain? Taoist Wang hesitated for a few seconds and said, the book does record some supernatural content. According to today's terminology, it has a certain classical romanticism. Lin Ziming, then Taoist Wang continued, for example, ancient books record that there is a large formation left by ancient immortals under the Qingchang Mountain, which leads directly to the underworld. Later, ghosts and gods escaped from it, causing harm to the world, and all living beings within 1,000 miles were devastated. Later, Patriarch Zhang Daoling came in person and built an underground palace on top of the formation to suppress the blue sky and the underworld, and this underground palace happened to be below the Zhangren Peak. Later, when Patriarch Zhang passed away, he used his remains as a site to suppress the ghosts and gods, and only then did he quell the chaos and save the lives of the people within 1,000 miles. Lin Ziming listened to the introduction quietly, and keenly noticed one of the words, Taoist Wang, are you saying that there is an underground palace under the Qingchang Mountain? Taoist Wang nodded and said, Colonel Lin, I understand what you mean. However, the underground palace is just a vague rumor. For thousands of years, countless Taoist sages have spent a lot of energy searching for it, but in the end, they found nothing. At the beginning, Zhang Xiantong sent his adopted son to explore Qingchang Mountain, but in the end, he still found nothing. My predecessor, Taoist Master Zhang Zhishan, also came to Qingchang Mountain several times in person, searching for months in the mountains and forests, but in the end, he still gained nothing. I learned Taoism from Taoist Master Zhang at that time. Later, he sat on the cliff and looked at the sky for a long time, shook his head and left. So Colonel Lin, those rumors are too vague after all, and they are not worth believing too much? Moreover, according to Qian Bensu, ghosts and gods caused chaos for thousands of miles. But to the west of Sichuan province is the Hengdun Mountains, which is remote and uninhabited. What are ghosts and gods doing there? So if this kind of thing really happened, the record should be that it caused chaos in most of Sichuan province. It is too imprecise to say that it is 1,000 miles in radius. We must believe in science. Lin Ziming. Chapter 297 How is this possible? To be honest, staying overnight in the mountains in winter is indeed a challenge. Not to mention that the environment of Qingchang Mountain is colder than ordinary mountains and forests, and the temperature at night has reached several degrees below zero. Lin Ziming and Wei Fan are not so easy. As practitioners, they can keep warm by just circulating their spiritual energy. But Zhao Ziming and other accompanying personnel are not so easy. However, after all, they are specially selected personnel, and their awareness of difficult conditions is much higher than those young people. In addition, with the assistance of simple heating equipment, a winter night in the wild was endured. Fortunately, no one caught a cold. At 4 o'clock in the morning of the next day, suddenly, a burst of helicopter engine sound came from near the mountain gate. At the same time, the night duty staff sent a message, the personnel and supplies sent by the organization have arrived. Then about half an hour later, the sound of a group of people walking and talking came from the way to the cliff. However, because the dawn is very late in winter, Lin Ziming did not see their faces clearly until the foreign aide came close to him with the help of the lights near the cliff. The leader of the group was a little old man in his 60s, who looked about the same age as Lin Li, but had much more hair than Lin Li. He had a high nose bridge, a square face, and a wisp of beard on his chin, and looked quite righteous. Obviously, this should be another scientific research master. Lin Ziming hurriedly stepped forward and was about to introduce himself when he saw someone behind the little old man from the corner of his eye. He immediately exclaimed, "Hey, Xiao Wang? Why are you here?" The person waved to him, "Colonel Lin, good morning, that's right." Following behind the little old man was Lin Li's direct disciple Wen Kang. The girl was seen grunting and carrying an instrument in one hand, following the little old man closely, looking like she had betrayed her master. However, after the initial surprise, Lin Ziming quickly reacted. Yes, Wang Kang's team had developed the L-17 practice system, so it was normal for her to be sent here. If we talk about a current understanding of spiritual energy in the local area, this girl can at least be ranked in the top 3. After several people came to the front, Wang Kang put down the instrument, jumped in front of Lin Ziming very familiarly, pointed at the old man and introduced, "Colonel Lin, let me introduce you. This is academician Li Baiyan, a big shot on the field of thermal condensation. I passed my elective defense with academician Li." Knowing that the other party was another top national talent, Lin Ziming immediately stood in awe. "Hello, academician Li, I am Lin Ziming." Li Baiyan shook hands with him politely. With Wang Qiang, a girl who was familiar with both sides, the meeting between the two sides seemed much more relaxed. "Colonel Lin, it's our first meeting, but I have heard of you for a long time." Seeing that Lin Ziming was a little surprised, Li Baiyan stretched out his hand and gestured. "Xiao Feng at the blood drawing point in Moto is my son. After I was approved to contact the Lightgate project some time ago, I heard him mention you. He also praised you as a passionate man." Lin Ziming laughed dryly when he heard this. "Oh, it turned out to be him." Then Wang Qiang introduced the other staff members again. "This is Guo Feng from the Institute of Geology, this is Yu Xianmin, and this is..." After briefly getting to know everyone, Lin Ziming glanced at his watch. "It's 4:32 in the morning, there's still plenty of time. Academician Li, do you want to take a break and recuperate?" Li Baiyan waved his hand and put on a serious face. "No need to rest, time is running out. Colonel Lin, let's start the test now. There may be many local worms who add water or like to take a posture, who have no level but are very arrogant. But those water-smuggled people will never be approved to contact such projects, and real top scientific researchers like Li Baiyan all have the awareness of hard work and perseverance. For example, Mr. Liu, who won the National Science and Technology Progress Award with Li Baiyan, once caused countless people to cry because he revised the manuscript on the second-class high-speed rail. Lin Ziming likes to deal with such pragmatic people the most. Hearing this, he immediately had a better impression of Li Baiyan. "Thank you for your hard work, academician Li." Then the group came to the edge of the cliff and began to prepare the equipment. 15 minutes later, a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer was ready and began sampling. 10 minutes later, a test report came out. Li Baiyan took the report handed over by his assistant and looked at it for a few times, and his brows suddenly twisted. Seeing this, Wang Qiang on the side asked curiously, "Academician Li, is there any problem with the analysis result?" Li Baiyan nodded and handed her the report. "Xiao Wang, take a look for yourself." Wang Qiang took the report, looked at it for a few times and exclaimed, "Unknown gas 0.3 per mil. The properties are consistent with the characteristics of spiritual energy, more than 300 times less than the Great Mo realm, but it still exists. I'm going to see, how can the total amount of nitrogen deposition be so small?" I saw that in one of the columns of the report in Wang Qiang's hand. The nitrogen content per unit volume of air remained unchanged, but the total amount of nitrogen deposition in the air was terribly small. As we all know, nitrogen is the basic component element of protein, genetic material, chlorophyll and other key organic molecules. All organisms need nitrogen to survive. Nearly 80% of the gas in the atmosphere is nitrogen, accounting for a very high proportion. The biogeochemical cycle of nitrogen and phosphorus will cause the so-called decoupling phenomenon. Previously, people generally believed that the source of nitrogen was the atmosphere. But current research has found that about 1/4 of the nitrogen comes from weathering. Because of this, often, there are many areas with a large number of exposed rocks on one side, and there are often a large number of trees on the back, thus forming various spectacular and wonderful natural scenes such as Guilin landscape, such as Huangshan, and this cliff of Zhangren Peak. Cliffs refer to the steep side of the mountain. Even if you have never seen this scene in reality, you should be able to imagine it. Where there are cliffs, exposed rock bodies can be seen almost everywhere. In addition, Wang Daoshi mentioned before that this generation is blowing valley winds, and there is absolutely no lack of weathering conditions. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the total amount of nitrogen deposition in the air here should not be too low. However, the test report in Wang Qiang's hand shows that the total amount of nitrogen deposition in the air is only 4.7 kilograms per hectare. Li Baiyan thought for a while and said to his assistant, "Xiao Zhou, go and organize everyone to explore whether there are any areas around that are suitable for large gatherings of blue-green algae or frankia." Xiao Zhou is a very introverted young man. He pushed up his glasses and said, "I understand. I'll do it now. Students who have studied chemistry should know this. Nitrogen resources in nature are very abundant, but only a few prokaryotes, namely bacteria and blue-green algae, can fix nitrogen in the air. These prokaryotes convert nitrogen in the atmosphere into nitrogen that can be absorbed and utilized by plants through self-generation or symbiosis with plants, which is called biological nitrogen fixation. Among them, the most famous is rhizobium, which belongs to the category of Frankia. So Li Baoyan's first reaction after reading the report was that there might be a piece of autotrophic bacteria around. Autotrophic nitrogen fixation has low efficiency and small amount of nitrogen fixation. In order to completely digest a nitrogen in an area, the number of such bacteria will definitely not be small, and it may even be so large that it is unimaginable. An hour later, the sky was slightly bright. Xiaozhou came over breathlessly. Dean Li, we have tested the surrounding area and found no bacteria that meet the requirements. Academician Li heard this and looked even more puzzled. Strange, without nitrogen-fixing bacteria, where would the nitrogen go? Most plants cannot absorb nitrogen. Wang Qiang, who was standing by, also had a distressed look on her face, and she looked into the distance blankly. Where did the missing nitrogen go? Seeing that the foreign aide from the headquarters seemed to have no solution, Lin Ziming took the initiative to bring 2 glasses of water and said to the two, "It's a bit cold, everyone drink some water first, don't catch a cold. In another hour or so, it will be almost completely bright. At that time, please ask Chief Wei to help and see if what Taoist Wang said is accurate. If the spiritual energy in the morning is indeed more concentrated than at other times, then we may be able to start from this angle." Wang Qiang thanked him and was about to take the cup of water when a ray of light suddenly flashed in her mind. The girl quickly ran to the place where the equipment was placed, picked up an instrument, and tested the collected air sample. After about 5 or 6 minutes, the instrument test results came out. Wang Qiang quickly took out the file from the equipment and locked her eyes directly on one of the lines. After a moment, a cry of surprise rang out. "This is impossible, how could this happen?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298. So that's it. On the cliff. Hearing Wang Qiang's exclamation, Lin Ziming and Li Baoyan looked at each other, and the two hurriedly walked to her side. After arriving at the area where the instrument was placed, Li Baoyan first cast his eyes on Wang Qiang's hand, and immediately recognized the origin of the instrument in the girl's hand. Ion beam guide? Xiao Wang, did you detect any special particles? Wang Qiang heard this and raised her head with a slightly complicated expression. The girl's eyebrows were trembling at this time, and she said word by word, "Academician Li, Colonel Lin, I found a small amount of Y particles in the air." Seeing that Lin Ziming and Li Baoyan were a little confused, she continued to add, "Y particles are condensed particles produced by microorganisms in the earth vein flame, that is, evil spirits." Li Baoyan heard this and hurriedly took the beam guide from her hand. This beam guide is a bit like a household vacuum cleaner, and the screen at this time clearly shows several numbers, CM2, BT5, GK13, ER6. CM2 represents oxygen molecules, and the next two represent carbon dioxide and nitrogen molecules. The last ER6 is the name given to Y particles by the rabbits. Beam guides or microscopic particles are actually a very strange field. In this field, as long as you have captured this particle once, you can basically analyze its general characteristics completely. Even neutrinos are extremely difficult to capture. A long time ago, at the end of August, after the Y particle was discovered by Liu Xiangqian's team from the earth vein flame, its characteristics and energy levels were recorded in detail in the energy level spectrum. As a special particle, the Y particle exceeds the scope of ordinary gas phase mass spectrometers, but can be completely captured by the beam guide. So Wang Qiang just used the instrument to scan it slightly and detected the existence of this particle. At this moment, Wang Qiang held the beam guide in his hand and murmured, "So that's it. So that's the existence of Y particles. Everything can be explained." Li Baoyan and Lin Ziming were a little confused. But unlike Lin Ziming, who is a rare classmate, Li Baoyan has no shortage of professional knowledge, but he has only just been exposed to the secrets of the Damo realm some time ago, and has not yet fully understood many of the previous research on the Damo realm. Therefore, at this moment, he has not yet completely matched the situation with the knowledge he has stored. "Xiao Wang, can you explain the whole situation?" Wang Qiang nodded and said, "Academician Li, You should have seen it in the archives. When we were studying the earth vein flame, we found an unknown microorganism in the freeze state in the flame core. This unknown microorganism can survive in super high temperatures, but it cannot escape from the flame core, of course. This was the result of the research at that time. Now we can completely separate it. Its properties are similar to nitrogen-fixing microorganisms, which can directly convert free nitrogen in the air into nitrogen-containing compounds. This is recorded in chapter 47. Then Wang Qiang grabbed a handful of air and said, "It is obvious that there are some special environments near the cliff that allow some condensed microorganisms to survive. Due to the existence of such microorganisms, the total amount of nitrogen in the air near the cliff is always not high because the nitrogen is absorbed by them. And condensed Y particles are generated through special reactions. At the same time, it is also because of this," Li Baoyan took over the words with understanding. "It is also because of this that the back mountain of Qingchang Mountain is so cold and even called the ghost den in history." Hearing this, Lin Ziming on the side suddenly thought of something and clapped his hands in sudden realization. No wonder, I was wondering why it was so cold here. Even Chief Wei shivered when he first arrived here. At that time, I thought it was because the protective spiritual energy was not circulating, just as Lin Ziming said. As a practitioner of the 9th level of key training, Wei Fan, not to mention the humanoid self-propelled Stark, has a physical fitness that is 7 or 8 times higher than that of ordinary people. Even if the inner sea is not circulated in order to save spiritual energy in the native land, the reason should not be stimulated by the wind and cold. But if it is the evil spirit formed by Y particles, it is different. Even if the content is very small, its instantaneous temperature and penetration are not low. It must be said that after Wang Qiang discovered that there was a small amount of evil spirit in the air, many of the original abnormal situations could be solved. Then Lin Ziming suddenly thought of something and asked, "Wait, there is another question I don't quite understand. The coldness of Qingchang Mountain can be felt near the mountain gate, which means that there should be a small amount of Y particles in that area, right? But why is there only a small amount of spiritual energy near the cliff, and only here is the total amount of nitrogen so terribly small?" Hearing this, Li Baoyan looked up and exchanged a glance with Wang Qiang. Then, a smile that was unique to the top students appeared on the faces of the two people. Li Baoyan explained, "The reason is very simple. These situations show one thing. This is the place where the nitrogen fixation condensation reaction occurs." Perhaps infected by the smile from the top student, Lin Ziming seemed to have received an experience card from a science student, and once again keenly discovered a problem. That's not right. Even if the area near the cliff is the place where the reaction occurs, the total amount of nitrogen here should have been kept constant. That is, the amount of reaction will be replenished by the outside world. Wait, doesn't it mean that the reaction is not going on all the time? Li Baoyan nodded heavily and gestured with his hands. If nothing unexpected happens, it is probably like this. This place is like a warehouse. Someone will take away the goods at a fixed time every day, and the rest of the time is used to fill the goods. That is to say, when you first arrived at the scene yesterday, the total amount of nitrogen must have been much lower than it is now. As for this receiving time, it is probably at— Li Baoyan stretched out his voice. This time, it was the turn of the three people to speak in unison. Early morning, having solved a key problem, everyone's mood involuntarily improved. Perhaps because of her relaxed mood, Wang Qiang suddenly thought of something. Wait, early morning, Qingchang. The original name of Qingchang Mountain was not called Qingchang Mountain, right? Lin Ziming smiled and said, "You have to ask Zhang Daoling and Tang Zizhen. Maybe it is true." Then he said with a serious look, "You too, the mystery of nitrogen content and Qingchang Mountain environment has been solved at any time, but the overall situation cannot be too relaxed. We still have many problems that have not been solved. For example, we still don't know where the source of spiritual energy and the area where condensed microorganisms are located. In addition, why are there so few Y particles and spiritual energy here? Is it just this little, or is it blocked by something? In addition, I heard Taoist Wang tell a rumor in the book room of the Taoist temple before. It is said that there is an underground palace arranged by Zhang Daoling under Qingchang Mountain to suppress the netherworld. Now it seems that the netherworld refers to Y particles, that is, evil spirits. Then I personally think that the possibility of the existence of this underground palace is very high. Therefore, the very critical node now is early morning. We don't know what time early morning refers to, but it's the time we haven't been running. About 3 or 4 hours. So everyone hurry up and prepare. If nothing unexpected happens, we may need to ask the organization for help and prepare to dig the cliff. Chapter 299, Underground Palace. Underground Palace. After listening to Lin Ziming's arrangement, Wang Qiang and Li Baoyan nodded at the same time, then turned and left, each making relevant preparations. Compared to the unpredictable spiritual energy, the movement of Y particles is not that difficult to control. After all, the volume of this kind of particle is not very small, and the airflow formed is also perceptible to practitioners like Wei Fan, otherwise there would be no such thing as evil spirit entering the body. Of course. This is just a possibility. After all, no one knows how many Y particles appear in the early morning. If the number is too small, even if Wei Fan takes action, I am afraid there is nothing he can do. For example, when he first entered the mountain gate, Wei Fan simply felt a little cold and did not sense the existence of Y particles because it was too few, so few that it was barely noticeable. On the other side, after separating from Li Baoyan and Wang Qiang, Lin Ziming found Taoist Wang. Taoist Wang, there is good news and bad news, which one do you want to hear? Taoist Wang stroked his beard, glanced at Wang Qiang who was handing over matters not far away with understanding, thought for a while and said, Colonel Lin, the good news you want to tell me is that the existence of the ancestors' underground palace or formation has been confirmed? As for the bad news, are you ready to give me a shot of prevention? For example, it is possible to dig up a piece of the cliff or even the entire thing. Lin Ziming, did you, old Taoist, read the script? Taoist Wang made a comment and said with a smile, it's just simple psychology and behavioral analysis. Colonel Lin, you have to believe in science, Lin Ziming continued. Then he rubbed his temples speechlessly and admitted neatly, yes, if nothing unexpected happens, the underground palace left by Patriarch Zhang Daoling is very likely to exist, and it is most likely under the cliff. But it is definitely not suppressing some ghosts from the underworld, but another kind of substance is sealed. As he said this, he suddenly thought of something and asked, Master, the predecessors of King Chang Mountain should not have dug this cliff before, right? Taoist Wang shook his head when he heard this. The industrial level in ancient times was limited, and moving mountains and chiseling stones was not an easy task. In addition, breaking ground involves the theory of feng shui, so the ancient King Chang sages basically did not have this idea. As for the industrial level after the founding of the People's Republic of China, it has gradually matured, but considering various reasons, the heads of successive generations eventually gave up this idea. Although Lin Ziming did not believe in feng shui, he certainly wanted to tout it commercially at this time, so he said politely, following the ancestral system, respecting the ancients and valuing the Tao, it is worthy of being a virtuous sect with a long heritage. Taoist Wang looked at him with a strange look. It's not that mysterious. The biggest reason is actually that we don't have money. The price of excavators going into the mountain to dig is too expensive. Lin Ziming, Taoist Wang spread his hands when he saw this. The ownership of the back mountain of King Chang Mountain has always been in the hands of our Taoist temple. Some mountains and forests are indeed quite troublesome. It would be more peaceful if we dug them up for infrastructure construction. But the King Chang lineage is not the kind of person who comes out to make money. The year before last, the leader went down the mountain to ask about a price, and he was scared and ran back to the mountain in less than an hour. Lin Ziming, finally, he slapped his forehead and sighed faintly. So Taoist, if Xiao Wang and the others have results of the test later, do you agree to dig the cliff? Taoist Wang nodded and said frankly, if it was before today, I might not agree to this kind of thing. After all, this is the place where my lineage has been meditating for many years. But now that we have come into contact with spiritual energy, the value of the official guidance of the avenue for us cannot be replaced by a cliff. In addition, I will not hide it from Colonel Lin. In fact, when I was meditating as a child, I thought that one day I could dig the cliff open, just like those children who want to blow up the kindergarten. Lin Ziming heard this and breathed a sigh of relief. It has to be said. Taoist Wang is indeed a very sensible person. You will find that dealing with such a person is not so tiring. In a sense, this is also a manifestation of Tao heart. Then the two of them parted temporarily. Lin Ziming went to talk to Wei Fan about the relevant matters of sensing condensed particles. He couldn't put all the chips on the instrument. It would be safer to prepare with both hands. Taoist Wang went to find his own head and told him that he might dig the cliff. The current head of King Chang Mountain is surnamed Guo, and his Taoist name is Kingsuzi. He is also one of the members selected for the practice project. This time he came back mainly to take over the handover of the Taoist temple at the mountain gate. Of course, digging the cliff is only a theoretical possibility. After all, Y particles and the like have not been detected yet. It can only be said that combined with the records in the classics, Zhang Daoling's Taoist temple is likely to suppress the evil spirit below. An hour later, a ray of sunlight emerged from the end of the earth. I have to say, if you have nothing to do on weekdays, come to a place like Qingchang Mountain for a vacation, brew a pot of tea that is not particularly expensive early in the morning, and watch the sunrise leisurely on the cliff is also a good choice. However, Lin Ziming and others did not have this leisure and elegance at this time. They had more important things to do. As early as half an hour ago, several sophisticated equipment were placed in multiple corners of the cliff. At the same time, various values were constantly jumping on several screens. The current outdoor temperature is -2.5 degrees, the humidity is 56.4% without condensation, the power supply equipment is DC5V, and the peak current is 1A. There is no abnormality, the number of sensors is 16, the atmospheric pressure is 676.7 mmHg, and the boiling point of water is 97.3 degrees. There is no abnormality, the current wind speed is 1.6 meters per second, and the wind is light and there is no abnormality, the oxygen concentration is 21.6%, slightly higher than the standard concentration. The total amount of nitrogen deposition has increased compared with the previous one. The current deposition value is 5.2 kilograms per hectare, which is nearly 100% higher than 75 minutes ago. After hearing this, Wang Qiang on the side turned to Li Baoyan and said, "Academician Li, it seems that your previous guess is correct. The loading step is still going on here on the cliff." Li Baoyan nodded slowly. "I hope the next test will go smoothly. Since the reaction of condensing microorganisms absorbing nitrogen to produce Y particles does not generate pressure, the nitrogen in the air can only be filled by a natural quantitative difference. When the volume of the surrounding gas is fixed, the speed of this quantitative difference filling is not fast. Therefore, after more than an hour, the nitrogen deposition value has only increased by about 10%. The nitrogen deposition value in ordinary areas is generally 8.7 kilograms per hectare, and occasionally it can exceed 10. The deposition value of farmland will be higher, generally around 20. And a few areas can even reach 30. Therefore, the total amount of nitrogen in this area of the cliff is indeed pitiful." Just as Wang Qiang was talking to Li Baoyan, Assistant Zhao Haiming's decibels suddenly rose a few decibels. "Director Li, the nitrogen has begun to decrease, and the rate of disappearance is very fast. When I was typing 1,500 words at home, I received a call from my mother, saying that my grandfather vomited again, and rushed to the hospital. I was originally planning to write a 4,000-word chapter, but now I can only make up 2,400 words. This time it was really not an intentional chapter." Chapter 300, Underground Palace. Underground Palace. On the cliff. Knowing that the nitrogen around them had begun to change, the atmosphere of the entire project team suddenly became solemn. Even Wang Qiang, a researcher who had been in contact with spiritual energy and evil spirits in the Great Mo realm for a long time, could not help but feel a sense of pressure in his heart. After all, this is a major project related to the local spiritual energy, which may involve some ancient secrets. And the first time he heard Zhao Haiming's report, Lin Ziming quickly looked at Wei Fan and said in a hurried tone, "Patriarch Wei, take action." Wei Fan nodded heavily and swallowed a pill in his hand. Then, regardless of the consumption of spiritual energy, he expanded his divine consciousness to the maximum range. He swallowed a top-level soul-recovering pill among the second-level ones, which can restore a large amount of spiritual energy in a short time. If the value of Wei Fan's divine consciousness blue bar is 100, the effect of the soul-recovering pill is 500. Although it is a bit wasteful, this juncture is not an occasion to promote a frugal style. At the same time that Wei Fan expanded his divine consciousness, in the four directions of the cliff, several sophisticated testing equipment also started working at the same time. Among them, Zhao Haiming's position is in the east, and to the west is a sensor network master control. At this time, the ground has been covered with femtometer-level IZC sensor networks, and the size of Y particles is only picometer level. It is simply a behemoth for the whole of the sensor network. Once you pass through it, you will definitely feel full. As long as the Y particles start to float up from the ground, the sensor network can detect their existence at the first time. In addition, considering that the exit of delivery may appear in the air. Therefore, Li Baoyan and others deliberately used drones to pull up a ring network around, which is considered a patch. In addition to the east and west, there are several instruments in the north and south that use EDIA to mark a large number of nitrogen molecules. The diameter of nitrogen molecules is 0.304 nanometers, and the limit radius of EDIA is 0.013 nanometers, which is still very easy to mark. These days, the basic isotope labeling method has developed to a very mature level, not to mention the front-end killer like EDIA. I heard that the Russians used the CCD system to build a high-sensitivity labeling module a few years ago, and it can even quickly mark photons within 2/10,000ths of a second. However, due to the lack of relevant papers and public reports, the international community is still skeptical about this technology. But no matter what, it is still very simple to mark nitrogen with existing technology. In other words, WAFAN is mainly responsible for sensing the location of the emergence of condensed Y particles, and the scientific and technological instruments are divided into two categories. The sensing network is responsible for sensing the area where the Y particles emerge, and EDIA is responsible for tracking the disappearance point of nitrogen. It can be regarded as a double insurance. After everything is ready, everyone began to wait for the results. After more than 40 seconds, Zhao Haiming suddenly raised his hand. Report, the total amount of nitrogen in the surrounding air has been reduced by half, but the nitrogen marked by us has not decreased at all. Li Baoyan frowned. The marked nitrogen has not disappeared? How could this be? Could it be that the entrance that absorbs nitrogen is exclusive to carboxyl marking? Wang Qiang shook her head and denied this guess. It shouldn't be like this. When we analyzed the earth vein flame, we marked carboxyl and 15N. Later, when there were more samples, we even tried sulfur isotopes. The reaction chain can be observed to be generated by Y particles and nitrogen-containing polymers, otherwise we would not be able to mass-produce the short-term version of the earth vein flame. Li Baoyan remained silent and looked at the main control of the induction network again. However, to his disappointment, there was no obvious change on the main control. There were a few small fluctuations, but they were small peaks generated by the free flow of Y particles in the air. In other words, occasionally one or two particles passed through the induction network, which had no practical value. Li Baoyan saw this and frowned even more. Half of the total nitrogen has disappeared. If it is because of some unknown uncontrollable factors, it would be fine. After all, the importance of the entrance is far less than the exit. But what is the situation now that no Y particles appear? Is it because the reaction has not ended, or is it that the exit for the Y particles is not actually on the cliff, but in some places around? Li Baoyan's tone was a little solemn, and the situation seemed to be developing in a bad direction. There must be an exit for the Y particles, there is no doubt about that. If it is not on this side of the cliff, then it must be somewhere else nearby. But the word nearby is easy to say, but it is extremely difficult in practice. Because this is a mountain forest, not a flat land. Even if it is a single Sangren peak, it is extremely difficult to monitor the whole situation. Just talk about this IZC induction network. The cost of 1 square meter of this induction network is more than 60,000 yuan. Even if the accuracy is reduced, it will cost at least more than 30,000 yuan. And the entire Zhangren Peak, even if it is just near the cliff, the area is more than 4 or 5 square kilometers. Don't think that 4 or 5 square kilometers doesn't seem to be large. If converted into square meters, it is 4 or 5 million square meters. Even if the detection is extremely important, the rabbits are willing to spend the money. But it is not easy to get enough induction networks in a short time. After all, this thing is not a standing material. Under normal circumstances, a research institute can have a reserve of 200 or 300 square meters. Looking at the decreasing nitrogen, Li Baoyan pressed his temple with his thumb joint in distress. In the final analysis, it is because our equipment is not advanced enough. Especially for unknown fields such as cultivation, the inherent experience is really difficult to match the standard. Wang Qiang heard this and nodded deeply. At present, various research projects in the Great Mo realm are progressing rapidly, but there are still many key nodes stuck at bottlenecks. This is actually a very helpless thing. Rather than saying that the knowledge reserve is insufficient, it is better to say that the profession is not suitable. After all, Our existing instruments are not designed for cultivation, just like you let tanks go to naval battles. Except for the 59 modified, they can't play their strength at all. Although the camp has started research on new instruments and has lasted for several months. But no matter how fast the progress is, it is impossible to use it in today's occasion. Then Li Balian turned his eyes to Wei Fan. This chief instructor of the Jumang base was the only hope at this time. Another half a minute passed. Wei Fan opened his eyes a little tiredly, looked at Lin Ziming and others, and shook his head apologetically. Sorry, Colonel Lin, I couldn't sense the flow of evil spirits. Hearing this, the atmosphere at the scene became visibly depressed. For scientific researchers, there is nothing more disappointing than reacting to something happening in front of their eyes, but being unable to do anything about it. This mentality is like the ex-husband in a short movie, powerless and angry. Perhaps sensing this depression, even the sky began to slowly rain drops. The raindrops were not big, but the winter rain hiding people's faces was like a knife cutting. Li Balian sighed lightly when he saw this, and was about to ask everyone to hide from the rain first. But he glanced at the main control screen. It was mentioned before that once the Y particles came into contact with the screen, it would sense and display it. In the past few minutes, its line was flat and motionless, like a corpse lying. However, at this moment, the screen was surging wildly, like surging waves hitting the shore. Li Balian was not the only one who noticed a change on the screen. Others also saw this situation one after another. 1 second later, Wang Qiang, Li Balian, Zhang Ximing, Lin Ziming, and even Wang Daocheng all looked up at the sky at the same time. Finally, Wang Qiang said what everyone was thinking, "Oh my god, the underground palace is in the sky." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.